recommendation on where we go with the transportation plan. What's important about this is that we have an approved transportation plan. The city is obligated, okay, by policy, because the city council by ordinance approved it, it is the responsibility of the city now to implement that plan. And that's where it gets a little bit more interesting, because in the implementation, the important thing is to get input as we start to look at this. It's going to have an impact on you. The way I'd like to approach this in terms of the agenda is simply this. I'd like to give a little timeline of how we got to where we are today and why you're here. Okay? I think it's important you understand the whole story. I think that's important to understand what's going on, how it happened, and hopefully get you to understand where we're going. Second is, I want to make sure you understand, according to the approved transportation plan, where the future calming devices are proposed to be located. Now, I say devices because devices are not necessarily a circle. It is literally any one of those options that are sitting behind you if you had a chance when you walked in to look at them. These are devices. The transportation plan allows then some flexibility to look at the right device at the right location that meets the needs of the people. But I want to make it clear to you right up front, traffic calming devices by their own nature are not roundabouts. They are there and their purpose is to slow people down. I cannot tell you how many times the city has been approached from residents, our residents, you and us, who have complained that simply says, City Council, you need to do something to slow the traffic down. Traveling 5, 10, 15 miles an hour over the speed limit, particularly when the speed limit's 25 miles an hour, is dangerous. And we cannot have an accident. So the city is taking itself on and simply says, we're going to do something about it. And we've taken action to do that, okay? Then we're going to ask Dr. Perrin to give us a presentation. I'm not sure what he's going to talk about, but he's in a great position to talk about some things in terms of traffic calming devices and maybe transportation as a whole. Then after that, I'd like to open up for public comment. I'd like to get your thoughts. We want to get some information from you. Specifically, I'd like, if we can, start off to look at the calming device that was located on 5700. We need to talk about that one because it's on your mind. Some of you are coming from that neighborhood. Let's talk about it. And then the other option would be is, should we put something in there that will work better? We need to have your input. Fair enough? Okay. So with that, work with me if you can. What I'd like to do is just simply go through a little bit about the history so that everybody in the room and anybody who may listen to this recording after it's done, because we are recording it, I want to make sure you understand how we got here and understand literally what we need to do to make this better. And if I learned anything from this experience, the most important thing would be is, and I read this in the Federal Highway Administration, that when you're dealing with these kinds of devices, whatever they are, public input is critical. I'll be blunt. We did not do that. Okay? And I'm confident, okay, in the future, if we're going to do some things, public input has to be part of that discussion. And so we're going to make that happen. But just recognize we stepped in it on this one. We just didn't do it right going in, didn't know a lot about it. I'm going to explain that whole process, but we will in the future do it right. Fair enough? Okay. Let me just make a clear point of when all this happened and what took place. In the city council meeting, and this information is backed up by public records, so I'm not pulling anything out of the hat. It is all public record that I'm referring to. In the public record it says, in the city council meeting that took place on 9/18/2018, last year, the city announced in that public meeting that simply says two traffic studies were unfolding. And the reason for those traffic studies and why it was critical was because we have heard lots of complaints. People were saying we're tired of high-speed travels in our neighborhoods. And so on this date, 18th of September, in the city council meeting minutes, traffic studies were introduced to us. In that meeting, it was indicated the first one, which had already been started, was they're looking at traffic study located at 2500 West, 5175 South. If you're not sure where that's located, I will indicate to you is it's obviously between 56 and 48. It's just above the tracks on that first road as you come down, and if you go north a little bit, you will run an intersection. Not where the street divides, but actually a little further up. There's a main traffic right there, and the people are concerned, and they have a right to be concerned. The fact of the matter is, the traffic study showed there were 900 cars traveling that street every day. Every day. And so that's important to the conversation of what to do. Now, immediately upon that, the discussion was the complaints were coming in terms of the location at 5700. In this case, the 3750 location. At that location, the people were saying much the same thing we're hearing in other parts of the city. High-speed travel. And that high-speed travel on a 25-mile-an-hour was dangerous. And they said, we'll do a study. And as they went through that study, they started to pull some information in, and this is what came out of that meeting. And let me just tell you how the record shows. In that meeting, the public record shows that during the council meeting itself, Councilmember Paul brought up the discussion about should we put a four-way stop sign at that location. There was some discussion about that. At the conclusion of that, Councilmember Tafoya made a motion in that group that simply says, let's do something, and what he recommended to the council would be is, let's put four-way. The council agreed, let's go ahead and put a four-way stop sign at that 57 and 3750 sign right there. That's the meeting minutes. That's what it shows. Now, an email came back shortly after that. This is happened, in essence, about roughly 9 days after that. It dealt with the issue about four-way stop signs on that area. Here's what was mentioned, and let me just read it to you because you need to understand the science behind this. The engineering, the technical people said this: caution on installing stop sign without knowing the traffic counts and speeds. Advising us, before you simply put four-way stop signs in there, caution, because you need to do the homework to justify it. It went on to make this important comment. It says this: using stop signs as a traffic calming device. Now remember, a traffic calming device is to slow traffic down. It is not to basically direct traffic. It's just to slow the traffic down, is not supported by the transportation community. Okay, that's interesting. Research shows that unwarranted all-way stops are violated, making the intersection more dangerous. Okay, now that came into the city. This is after the city council said put four-way stops in there. So what happened was at that moment, and here's the information that came out of that was, the information continues that says, if speed is the concern, then there are many more appropriate options such as traffic circles, chicanes, you can see what they look like, speed humps, other ones that you should consider. So now the city manager at the time, not here in this meeting, okay, basically said, I'm concerned about an issue dealing with how dangerous it could be if we put four-way stops. That caused him to pause. We have a problem, we need to fix it. So then he looked at the options and he says, okay, about that same time, a little bit later, on this day we received an email that outlined the draft layout of the traffic calming circle design. This is a design, a concept. We received that at the city level. It now showed a circle option. During the city council meeting that took place here, and the record shows, we had a UDOT Wasatch Civil Draft Transportation Plan presentation. That took place almost a month and a half after the original city council meeting took place about a problem at these two locations. And to be very blunt with you, the first introduction to traffic calming devices occurred in that meeting. I couldn't spell traffic calming device, but I'm telling you, they introduced the concept at that meeting. Great information, a lot of good information. Let me read to you what came out of the minutes in that meeting. It says, in part, there's a lot of information that's been recorded. It says, during this public meeting minutes, it was stated, it was recommended to the city that it begin with feedback signs, which flash when the driver's speed. Specifically, it states about 5700 South. In this case, feedback signs would be a great place to start. The next step would be to be at vertical speed bumps, chicanes, center islands, or traffic circles. Again, an effort to says that this council was trying to fix a problem that's been plaguing us for years. the recommendations came. That occurred in this meeting when we were all sitting down there, and the first introduction of these ideas about traffic calming circles was first surfaced. Then we started the installation at about the middle of November on that circle at that location. It was the first test. It seemed to be appropriate based on the engineering, based on all the feedback. We had to do something, and it was the first test. With that, we started to get some input. And trust me, some of you in here probably thought maybe it's not a bad idea to reach out and say we have some options. We need to look at this. So we got some input. So a clarification was provided because the city said, we need to look at, says, why did we choose this? And this is an interesting thing, and I think it's important you understand what took place in this conversation. It said this: because of the complaints coming into the city, was checking to understand more about the decision to go with the calming circle. Engineering provided this really important piece of information that I think will have you some idea of why we achieved this. It said this: we looked at a few different alternatives to address the speeding and ultimately decided on the traffic calming circle because they were least intrusive. Now, let me make sure you understand when I say intrusive. If you basically put a hump or a table and you hit that at 15 miles speed or over, you're going to get airborne. Those things are designed, the humps, the bumps, the tables, and all those are back there. You hit that at high speed, and I promise you, you will do it one time, and you'll probably never do that again. The circle was less intrusive, meaning is the requirement would be is just simply go around it, rather than have to launch over it. And to be honest with you, when he finished the conversation, he said this: the traffic calming circle was designed to minimize impact and cost, and yet effectively slow traffic down. That was the decision. With that decision, obviously, we now went back out to the public who were saying we didn't like it, don't like it, and tried to bring some rational decision to that. Well, it got interesting. Now the conversation took place where we now had an approval of the transportation plan, and that took place, as you can see, in the middle of December. Quite a long time after we first started seeing the problems, the transportation plan was approved. Let me be clear with you. The transportation plan does not say circles. There's nowhere in that transportation plan that says circles. It simply says traffic calming devices. And as you can see by the illustrations on the back, there's lots of options to choose from to help us to slow the traffic down. Okay? That's what we got. Now we started to see, and you've seen a little bit, this is the one I pulled out in a city council meeting. Now the concerns were coming into the meeting. City council members who oftentimes may have been somewhat outside of this, because a couple of council members found themselves to being basically bullseye with all the issues. They're getting a lot of complaints. I got a lot of complaints. Now it started to get more widespread. More of the council members were engaging in this, what obviously was a difficult situation. At that point, I will indicate to you is we elected to simply do a little presentation to simply calm the discussion down a little bit. Try to look at ways we can solve that. Councilmember Paul went up there and made this comment right after a presentation. I would suggest the council, an official meeting, let's set up a workshop, this workshop tonight, for us to basically address this issue effectively and come up with a solution. I'll be honest with you. In my opinion, the fate of that circle would have already been defined. There was enough public input, enough people talking about it. The council had to do something, and they were simply ready to do something, okay? And tonight was the something. The decision was made to simply remove it, and on April 19, 2019, the circle was removed. All of that happened. All of what I just talked to you about is documented in public record. So I can suggest to you is that that's how it all happened. Now here's what we'd really like to do tonight. What we'd like to do tonight is find a solution. What's the way ahead? What are we going to need to do to help make this right on 5700? But more importantly, there are plans for 7 more of these type of devices in the city. And we have an opportunity to hear the voice, hear your inputs, and let's take that input so the city council can provide direction to the staff so that we can execute their decision. That's what we'd like to do tonight, okay? Now, you may have lots of questions. If you allow us to go ahead and finish, I got a whole public period that we want to talk to you and let you open up about your questions, but I wanted to give you the history. Now, where are these going to go? According to the transportation plan, if you can see it, everywhere there is in fact a little red or triangle, that's where the plan is to basically place a traffic calming device. The type is yet to be determined. But here's what's important. If the council, based on tonight's conversation, another conversation says, I don't want any traffic calming devices in this city, then the transportation plan will have to be changed and the council will have to approve that. If the council goes up and says, I'm okay with all of those locations, then make some recommendations to the city manager in terms of the kinds of traffic devices that they would like to see in there, then it leaves the city manager an option to simply move based on some recommendations, okay? But those are where it's proposed today. And there's some documentation that supports why they are proposed at those locations, because of some research, traffic studies that simply says, we have some problems. Personally, I've looked at the data, and that's not the only place in the city that could benefit from it. But these are the ones on the target. These are the ones we're focusing on. This is where we want to focus our attention tonight. So with that then, if you don't mind, Dr. Perrin would like to take a few minutes and talk about some information he'd like to share with you. And upon his completion, then we're going to open up for public input. And let's hear what you have to say. What are you thinking, and what can we do to move ourselves forward in this effort? Okay?
Mayor, may I introduce Dr. Perrin?
I'm just going to do that, but thanks, Mark.
Yeah. Oh, you were?
No, but go ahead.
Oh, okay, thanks. Guys, I'm Mark Miller. I've been doing the consulting city engineering for Roy for about 25 years. Early in my career, I recognized that I liked pumps, hydraulics, water structures. I'm actually a registered structural engineer, but I enjoyed doing lots of things, but I did not like traffic engineering. So what I did was I hooked myself up with the best consultant I could find in the state, and he was a professor at the University of Utah at the time, and that was about 25 years ago. And he also did some work on the side, and so Dr. Perrin and I linked up that long ago. He's been a consultant for me with numerous cities throughout Weber County. He has his own business as well. He's worked at the University of Utah for a long time. Most of the people that you work with, most of the engineers at UDOT were trained by Dr. Perrin in his classes. And so we typically defer most of our traffic engineering questions to him. I was educated in traffic engineering just enough to be dangerous. So we usually talk to him. I understand what he's talking about, but I certainly wouldn't come up with all the same conclusions. So I just wanted to introduce him and our relationship.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mayor. Any questions? So really this was about feedback. So what I was asked to do is just kind of come here and talk about the traffic calming concepts, and then essentially get the feedback or get the questions that you'd like to have answered for this. So with that, I don't want to take a lot of time, because I think it's more, again, about your questions than anything, but I'll just go through briefly what I have is kind of traffic calming concepts and understanding why we try to do that. So the purpose is we want to reduce speeds or volumes. Volumes is typically because you have a cut-through problem. People are passing through your neighborhood because the arterial and collector systems aren't working and you're a shortcut. So there's a reason to address those volumes. It's not that we can reduce and make volumes disappear if everyone's using the road that lives in that area. That's what the roads are for. But the other thing is to reduce speed. So if we identify a speeding problem, then the intent is how can we best address that? And what we have is a toolbox. You see some of the examples back there on how to address it. So the first step is usually identify what the problem is, and then we're able to say, okay, from our toolbox, what's the most appropriate one in this location? What are we really trying to address? One or the other, or both of those? And again, the purpose of that is, again, the neighborhood, right? We're not going to put this on 19th West or other arterials, but for our local residential streets, what we're trying to do is make it a safer environment, more of a walkable and pedestrian safe environment for everyone to enjoy. So what we do is we typically are, and so as part of this As part of this, we're also going to talk about the presentation. I think the mayor pointed out, about how the process maybe can be formalized. Because I think what the mayor pointed out is this just kind of showed up one day in the intersection, and so that wasn't very well accepted, I think. And so the idea is I have a few examples, and cities across the nation have done this where maybe part of this will lead to, if you're going to have an official calming program. So I think one of the points was we can either say, nope, we're just going to rely on the police to enforce the speeds, or we can have a traffic calming program, and then we can develop that and customize it for the city. But we'll go through kind of some examples of what other cities have done through that. So typically, just as an overview of what traffic calming devices are, is they are introducing a geometric element to cause the driver to feel constrained. In theory, they're not really constrained. So if you have a nice wide piece of asphalt, sometimes that's just putting bike lane, striping, parking, an edge line, just to make them feel like it's a little bit more restricted. And so that can be more of a psychological. But really, traffic calming devices are behavioral things that to try to get people to feel like, well, it's a long straight road. It seems like 35 seems normal. As opposed to, well, but it's posted at 25. So how do we do that? Because just saying everybody promises to go 25 usually doesn't work. So what we can do is do a couple of things. We can let the drivers know what's happening and say, hey guys, maybe you're just listening to the radio, talking on your phone, you didn't realize you were speeding, and so those feedback signs are one way to do that. And if you have responsible drivers and they're like, oh, sorry, made a mistake, then they're going to adjust their speeds appropriately. You can reduce the width of the road. Wider roads tend to lead to higher speeds. That's just, again, just how we are, unfortunately. Or you can start actually making them do something, putting an impediment in their way, whether it's something that comes out from the side, something that's in the middle of the road, a vertical change like what the speed humps do, something that actually makes you feel like there's something in your way, has a natural tendency to slow people down as well. So here's the expected benefit when we apply this traffic calming device appropriately, is we're going to see reduced traffic speeds. That's the whole point. If we've identified there's a speeding problem, and what that means is it's typically 6 or 7 miles. So let me back up one second. What we normally use is what's called the 85th percentile. So we'll go out there, and typically on residential streets we collect about 100 points, which will give us a statistical significant data set. And with those 100 data points, what we can do is say, what is the 85th percentile? That's actually how we typically set speeds for collectors and arterials too, is because that's how we want people to go, is that uniformity of speed is almost as important as the speed. So we don't want people on 19th West going 25 when people are going 45 and we think that's safer. It's actually not safer. So that disparity in speed is also what we're trying to do, is get people tighter together. So the 85th percentile is what we designed for. And so what we're trying to do is reduce that traffic speed so that we can increase active transportation. It typically leads to reduced accidents. Now that's not to say that this is a high accident or any of these residential streets are high accident areas. But statistically, if you have that uniformity, if you have that reduction in speed to closer to the speed limit, then we have reduced accidents. And it leads to, again, increased pedestrian and bicycle safety. So let's keep going. So you probably know, if you looked at the back, there's several options that we have in this toolbox. This is just kind of a list of the different options, which include, I'm blocking it for sound, so luckily we have a second screen, apologize. We have speed humps and speed tables. There is actually a difference between them. Speed table just has the crosswalk in between. So they're designed a little bit differently. We don't do the shopping center speed bumps anywhere. So speed bumps are definitely not what we do, especially because of our snowplow issues. Chicanes are just coming out from the side, which really narrow it from, instead of trying to narrow it in the middle of the road, you narrow it from the edge. And so what you do is you take up some of that parking area, and it makes it seem like there's a choke point, and that causes people to tap their brakes. We have the choker islands and the bulb out corners, which are all other methods of reducing the width of the effective width of the street in certain areas. And then you have the traffic circles, which we're familiar with. Again, and then you have striping or feedback signs. We're not getting into blocking roads or diverting traffic or some of the other higher level, what we would call traffic calming devices, if we thought this was a major cut-through area, where if people were, basically running through the neighborhood because 35th and 56 were so, congested that it was travel time savings. And then the speed feedback signs. That's kind of the list that we would be looking at for neighborhood roads in Roy. And then just to kind of give you a couple examples, they can be landscaped and be treated as an amenity. Some of them are, like this was an example of the traffic circle where they've done some landscaping. This is more of an entry choker. So essentially you come off a collector street, you just put a little landscape dial in that all the movements can still be done, but it lets people know they're entering a neighborhood type of thing. And so those are just kind of, because again, a lot of this is psychological, making people think, oh, this is a slower speed road. Not necessarily that I got 42 feet of asphalt, I can see forever, how come I can't go 40? So some of this is just to talk about the speed hump effectiveness. Typically, I can make this available, but this typically reduces also the volumes if you have a cut through. And where this is more important is where you're thinking about applying these and you have more of a grid network like we have in a lot of the Salt Lake cities. Because the problem is you may just move the problem. So you put speed humps on one street. Well, in a grid system, you go, I don't like going over the speed hump, so now I just moved it to the next street. So all these neighbors are happy, and you just made all these neighbors irritated. And so you have to strategically think about what am I trying to do, what is applicable to these locations, so that, again, it's a network-wide thing, and we don't put our blinders on and say, all we care about is this section that we see on Google Earth, and then, oh, well, when the next street complains, we'll deal with them. So try to be smart about those things. This kind of gives you an idea of the distribution, and all this information comes from federal highways. So this is not Utah specific, this is nationwide data that we kind of use in terms of evaluating, so we can have a statistical expectation, if you will, of applying these different things. It's kind of an example of chicane. This is a nice one because it also shows a retrofit, because most of these traffic calming devices are rarely put on roads to start with. There are some developments that are planned, master planned that way, but most of these are things that we're responding to a problem. And so one of the key things when we respond to the problem is usually drainage, because if we all of a sudden create a dam, we have a huge problem. And all of a sudden our $2,000 to $3,000 chicane that we now block and have to put catch basins and everything else in it is a $50,000 to $100,000 improvement. And so we have to kind of be smart about how we apply those things as well and what's appropriate. So it's not just a pick one and go with it, it's looking at all of these different factors as we evaluate what's most appropriate per location. And that's why, as the mayor pointed out in the master plan, we've said, these are locations we've identified there's a speeding concern, and if we're going to apply traffic calming, we say traffic calming. We don't say one thing or another, because you kind of have to then narrow in. The master plan is a 30,000-foot view, and then when you specifically go, well, we've identified a problem, now let's study that and decide what we're actually going to do. And this is where the feedback from those neighbors would be appropriate. So this one just kind of shows some pre and post installation. Again, it's a relative evaluation, because if we were having 45 mile an hour, then all of a sudden these things are super effective relative to that. And so part of it is determining at what level of speeding are you going to accept. We usually use that magic. If it's more than 5 miles over the posted speed, then you should address it somehow, or you should maybe consider that the speed limit should be raised, because that's the natural speed people are traveling. And so in the case specific to 57 South, the question would be, if we weren't going to address that speeding issue, then is this functioning more as a collector street as opposed to a local street? And is maybe a 30 mile an hour posted speed more appropriate? So that would be one of the things that you would evaluate or you'd consider if we're saying, how do we address that? There's the notorious traffic circle. You can landscape them and do things like that, and there's different ways. Again, the point being is that not only is my sight impaired, so I have a visual, I'm sorry, that's the wrong term. Your sight is not impaired, but you have a visual obstruction in ahead of you, so you by nature kind of back off on that lead foot maybe. And so it's a behavioral thing again, oh, there's something coming up, so I'm going to have to slow down to get around it. So that impediment is what helps people do that. And so on these long stretches of road is where this is typically kind of one of the tools that we use, because you see it in there, and so in your mind you're also thinking, oh, I'm going to have to slow down up ahead anyway to get around that. So, and this just kind of gets into the typical results, which is approximately the 5 to 8 reduction from the 85th percentile. And again, you typically, if you're having a cut-through issue, see that 20 to 30% reduction in volumes. But again, not sure that you would expect to see that in these cases, because a lot of where we've applied this are kind of neighborhood streets that we don't think seeing cut-through traffic. But that's, again, when you see those kind of reductions, that's what we're talking about. This is more just information of the different levels, because we can phase this, and that's the nice thing about it, is we can start off with something like maybe the city has 2 or 3 feedback signs, and lots of times the police have speed trailers that they're able to put out there. The key concern with that is making sure that they're continue to be effective, because again, if it's just residential streets, lots of times we get desensitized because you see it every day, at least twice a day type of thing. And so at that point, is that something that you feel like still has effect? And again, that's the conscientious, correct? I'm still not saying that right. Thank you. Driver that basically doesn't want to speed and feels like, no, I just wasn't paying attention. And so that's the information that I get back that makes me feel like, oh yeah, thanks for the reminder. Then we can get into the striping and kind of narrowing of things, or we get to those actual physical things that help you really say, okay, we tried these things, they didn't work as well, let's go to the next level, which is actually put something in their way and they kind of have to slow down. So the idea is, if we were developing a traffic calming official program, is we have this toolbox that has been tested throughout the country. And you would come through and you kind of take a look at the level 1 calming options. The key thing here is, what do they do? What is the impact? And so the factors that we would consider would be speed reduction, volume diversion. Is there a noise issue? Some of those, those speed humps, you're going to hear them when people go over them, right? If there is, that's your shocks move and your tires hit, the type of thing. Do we lose on-street parking? So some of these things like the chicanes or the bulb outs, we're going to take parking away from close to the corners, or if we have mid-block ones, because we physically are going to put something there to make the road skinnier, and so you can't park in that section of road. Access restrictions, emergency vehicle response is a key one that we look at, and transit, because the vertical deflections do slow down response time. So if this was considered an emergency response route, so make sure we understand emergency response routes are defined. It's not every street, because there could be an emergency at your house is considered an emergency response route. But those routes that are defined, we typically try not to put the vertical deflections like the speed humps on, because they've estimated approximately a 10% increase in response time on those for each speed hump. And when we do speed humps, again, it's more of a corridor thing. You don't put one and go like, whew, that half mile of road is now slower. You kind of have to put them in that appropriate spacing so that it affects the entire corridor. And then maintenance and initial costs are all factors, because if we can pick something that costs $3,000 instead of $10,000, well, now we can put 3 out there potentially to address other locations, because we still have a finite amount of money. So that's kind of what the toolbox that we look at when we go through the evaluations. And then you have different levels. Again, there's the level 1, 2, and 3 types, and you get progressively more aggressive in your type of traffic calming, basically. And this is kind of an example that you can see. I just picked the speed table, but for each of these, it's kind of categorized, and they have information about, okay, what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages, what is my expected effectiveness? So you can go through there, you can take a look, and then for each of these, we can consider each of the different options. And again, based on what we're trying to solve, volume, speed, both, we can take a look and see which one is most appropriate. So key thing to keep in mind is, again, the traffic doesn't disappear. I've rarely seen where you put in a traffic calming device and the traffic disappears. You may get it off that street, but that's where we have to make sure that we're thinking the greater good holistically of, okay, my problem just got shifted, or did we just address it? So when we try to divert volumes, again, it's only for cut-through traffic. Keep them on the arterials, not through my neighborhood. But we don't try to really say, let's move this traffic over to this street, because as long as it's not in my backyard, I don't care about it. So that's what we try to do, is be good neighbors, I guess, that way. And so that's what that just talks about, is that we need to. So again, specific to stop signs, and this comes from the federal highways. Stop signs are traffic control devices. There's actually warrants when you put them out there, especially when you go from a two-way to an all-way. And if you don't do it, or you try to use it for traffic calming devices, what happens is you'll see speeding in between them, because people feel like I stopped for no reason. Because if you don't have enough volume where it needs to be controlled as an all-way, then you come up, you stop, no one's there, then you go, and we actually see the speeds go up in between there because they all of a sudden feel like, I gotta make up my time. I stopped for no reason, so I need to go just a little bit more. And so we've actually seen that the speeds increase when you do the all-way stops, when they're not warranted. The other side is they also will start being violated. I have a father-in-law that's a great example. I should have brought him here today because he says, well, it doesn't really apply if I can see and nobody's coming, right? And so I've seen him and I go, nope, don't say that to me. But he's gotten a ticket before. I said, really? You didn't see the cop? But we will see, you do tend to see higher violations for the all-way stops because unfortunately it's a perception again that this isn't really justified. And so that's why we, in the traffic community anyway, don't, and that's why the email that started was, I think, something different because I think of liability for me and for the city in terms of if we put a stop sign in for no reason like that and there's an accident, then it's kind of like usually the attorney or the other side goes, well, where's your warrant for the all-way stop? Well, we didn't have it. We wanted to slow down traffic. Really? You see this quote from Federal Highways? Great, give us some money.
Dr. Perrin, I just wanted to interject here. I mean, I've been through this a couple of times, and I know your misconceptions about stop signs, but I know for a fact they work. Road West Park, it's a three-way stop, not four-way. And George Wall and North Park, we implemented three-way stop signs at both those locations, and it's done what it's supposed to do. I know you say it's a misconception, but my reality is it works, and it's proven here twice in our city. Just throw that out.
And I guess I would say, and I would say, was there a speed evaluation that showed that there wasn't an increase in speed mid-block? Because that's where you see the problem happening is like you say, there's a tendency for higher violations, but it's usually that you've taken that location at the intersection and said, okay, everything's slower now because majority of
There's
people
other
will stop.
factors there. Of course, there are parks, children are playing, drivers are more conscious of that also. That could come as a factor. I just know that it has worked twice in our city now.
You know, obviously these are the city streets, and so if that's the determination, I just as a traffic engineer can't recommend that because the data doesn't support that.
I get that.
But obviously, you know, and that's, to be honest, one of the cheapest fixes if you decide that's the way to go. Because what's the stop sign cost you? $200? But it's not supposed to be used for traffic calming. It would be something that you thought this intersection needed an all-way stop for traffic control. Yes.
Well, stop signs have been used for a long time. And everybody knows what they look like, and everybody notices them. As far as the speed is concerned, they have to stop their stop signs. If they don't stop, they're breaking the law. They're breaking a traffic law. And it doesn't matter if you're using a stop sign or if you're using a calming circle, the speed increases between them for both of them. It does. I've witnessed it.
We'll have to just, like I say, that's unfortunately we use statistical data that has come, and so that's not what the data indicates. So
It doesn't make sense.
Statistics
It
often
doesn't
do
make
not,
sense otherwise.
but they're hard to beat.
okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
Hold on, Joe.
I own the barn by the tracks on 4800,
Okay. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
anyway, the traffic comes down, and it's a wide road, comes down across the tracks, and then there's an island.
Mhm.
It cuts it down to a single lane.
Downhill.
Huh?
Downhill.
Yeah,
27 and 48.
No, there's two lanes. Well, there's an acceptance lane off of 27th, and then there's the bypass lane on 48. So it becomes two lanes to the west of 27th, correct?
mhm.
Okay. I'm sorry.
And then it goes out to 4 lanes again after it gets past the island. I've seen people run into the island, and then the roundabout, I call them a roundabout, you call them a calming device.
No, that's
down
that's
below.
an actual roundabout at 31st West.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they put beautification in there that blocks your view. And Roy High School's got 2 great big signs, says Roy High School, and you can't see the cars coming down. I don't know how many times I've been going up and have a car come around the circle for all the junk that's in the middle of it, in the road. Got trees and signs.
Okay, and so was there a
I
concern?
can't hear you very good.
I'm sorry, so your concern is that
You can't see.
you can't see? Well, roundabouts are actually not traffic circles. Roundabouts are designed
That's the point.
that you basically are supposed to be looking to your left
Slow down.
because it's a one-way circulation.
Can't do it because of the vegetation that's planted on the round. I love the roundabout, but I don't like the damn trees and signs in it.
Well, I will, with city council, or cities, I can take a look at it, but there's a very defined it's a diamond that actually sits in the roundabout center, because within that diamond, you can have landscaping and things, because we don't want people looking across, we don't want headlights.
Yeah, but there's a car coming down, making a left turn, and I'm going through, and he's coming down, I can't see him. He comes around the corner, and I gotta slam on my brakes to keep from hitting him. I've had that happen probably 50 times this year.
Well, we can, I guess, take a look at,
Well, and
Yeah,
maybe, let me just add to what Dr. Perrin's saying. You're not supposed to be able to see straight across that island.
I-
You are supposed to be looking to your left, and you can see to your left.
I can just see
Yes.
barely to
And
my left.
You can see plenty to your left.
No, I
Yes.
can't.
Well, we've measured the triangle, and it is there. And you can see to your left, and if a car is coming, you yield to that car. If a car is not coming, you don't yield to that car. But looking across the intersection defeats the purpose there.
So you're
So
supposed
it's
to block the
designed
intersection
properly.
so you can't see, huh?
Yes,
Okay.
that's actually part
I'm
of
through.
that's part of the calming.
Bullshit.
I'm sorry.
Here's what we'll do, okay? You brought this up in city council meeting, and we appreciate the
And I want to talk to you.
Yeah.
I come in to talk to you today
Let
about
us-
some other things.
Let us go ahead and step back. We'll have one more look at that and see if in fact it's...
I can't hear you
The
very good.
trees.
We'll have one more look at that to see if in fact it creates a hazard. Because your point
Take out some
is
trees.
there the limited sight view, is that creating a hazard?
The one that I'm most concerned with is the one across,
Yeah,
my
and-
barn.
And we're still waiting for UDOT
Yeah.
and the railroad, and Mark, your team may be part of that.
because
That intersection at 2748, right
Which is
there.
very dangerous,
Yeah,
yes.
and that's the one you also had a concern with, about that island and how that's working.
when you
Yeah.
get your work done that you're going to do on the train tracks, and that's going to dump more traffic into there.
And we recognize that there's some real challenges there, and your point, and I'll share this with you, Mark, we can get with Ross and Matt, but the issue deals with that one island that runs all the way down.
Right.
Is there a better solution?
Yeah.
So we'll take that issue up, and then we'll see if we can't get you the feedback you're looking for. At least we'll tell you exactly what we can and cannot do at that location. Fair enough?
That's fine.
I've not seen the drawings at that, but at least we'll get that information to you.
And we have worked with UTA,
I also wanted
UTA engineers, UDOT's engineers, and Joe on that.
Right.
And so I'd be happy to present that to anyone.
And we,
Yeah.
yeah, just for
Even
that.
in even in a private meeting with him.
We can do that.
Yeah.
I also wanted to talk to you about what I want to do by that barn. And,
It's on the north side.
huh?
It's on the north side. Your barn's on that north side. Okay.
Yeah,
Let's set up a time after this
No,
meeting and we'll
time
get
is-
together.
yeah.
Yeah,
North side.
Okay.
okay.
Just to finish up, essentially, that was the idea, is here at the end, we kind of have different proposed steps, that you will, if the traffic calming program is going to move forward. And this is to make sure that we have involvement. You have the technical side, because unfortunately, everybody with a driver's license is a traffic engineer, but we do have the technical side that we try to use. And essentially, we go through, but the input is important because, again, we have options and we have a toolbox. So knowing what those options are, understanding the pluses and minuses is why we can make informed decision, and in general, get that support of, okay, we know this is going to be out here, it's going to drive like this, but we want to address the speed, so we have to do something type of thing.
I'm sorry, did you go over the misconception slide? Did I?
That was just the stop sign, basically.
Oh, the stop sign.
Um,
Okay, thank you.
Because again, it started off as an always stop. Again, everybody, or the city can do what they want. Technically, that would be considered inappropriate use of a stop sign if you're doing it to slow traffic down. But again, it is done all the time.
Okay.
Yes?
Question on the stop sign issue versus that common circle. And I'm not taking anything away from you because I work with engineers a lot in my job. But you don't recommend a stop sign and you say the data doesn't show that, but yet your data showed these guys to put a calming circle that did not work.
It did work. We have data from before and after, and so just so you know,
No, you don't.
statistically, yeah, we do.
You know, you have them sitting on that street all over the place. That's what calmed the thing down.
No, it's not, actually. We went out there with
Anyway,
a speed gun and
we
sat
won't
there.
get all wound up like we did last time. It didn't. You can say what you want, it didn't work. Me and you don't disagree, it didn't work.
Okay.
I was right there on the news and watched a Dodge truck go flying through it, right there on camera, hello! So it didn't work. So anyway, my point is, you recommended these things that did not work, so
I'm going to take exception to that. They did work. We have statistical data that shows it worked.
It
Yeah.
did not
You
work.
can still fly
and
through
all
there.
the pictures that you show, if you'll look, those calming circles are big, that actually would slow somebody down. That little one did not slow anybody down. All it was an inconvenience and a, I don't know what you call it, that caused people to make improper left-hand turns. It just kind of like invited them to do that. Even the
had to
police
make
chief
it.
admitted that.
We're
That
pulling
was
trailer,
me.
you have to make an illegal left-hand turn.
So
Or go
really,
through the
Roy
church
City should
parking
give their
lot.
money back for all the tickets they gave out, illegal left-hand turns, because it was
Were there any illegal left-hand turn tickets?
oh, heck, yeah, a whole bunch.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So back to the calming circle, the pictures you show on all your charts are big calming circles. So That's you not a would slow calming down, circle. because if not, you couldn't navigate it.
It's a roundabout.
But that
It's
little
not-
teeny
Yeah,
thing
which
that
is
you
the
guys
same.
put in there did not slow anybody down. The only time it slowed somebody down is if there was cars parked there, and that kind of is your, like your little
No.
build out. I can't remember what you call
Hold
it.
out.
So,
When the police were sitting there.
and when the police were sitting there. Exactly. So my point is and I don't, this is gonna sound really bad, but why should we take your recommendation when you put something there that didn't work, that we know? You can say what you want. We live there, we know it didn't work. Versus something you say doesn't work.
Let me just answer the question. The first thing is that the recommendation did come, Jerry, you're right, and the city selected that decision. And that's where it kind of got started. And the reason why is because it appeared to be the most cost-effective of all the options. And I think that was the premise. If I was to do it all over again, to be honest with you, we would have this conversation probably in that parking lot, invite you on a nice day, and we would have said, what do you think is the best option? Because let me make this clear, and it was in the report. The first recommendation that came out of the research was to put that, that dynamic device back there, which would have been a speed indicator. That's what came out of the transportation plan meeting at that location. They're expensive, but that was what they recommended initially. The city basically came in and said, because they gave us some options, and said, here's some options, choose, and the city basically chose the least expensive, less intrusive device, which really is that calming circle. Now, again, I would have really loved to have this conversation before we put it in. And I promise you, we will have this conversation before we put another one in. But it's important that we recognize that it was not popular, and as a result of that, wasn't necessarily effective because it became more problematic than what it was worth. So here's the secret, and Jerry, help us with this because it's important. What do we do next? Because we need a solution. There's people on this side over here that's going to tell you, probably in this group, that's going to say is, they will not let their children play on 5700 out in that front yard because they can't tolerate people moving 40 miles an hour in a 25-mile-an-hour zone. The risk is too much. Or faster.
Mm-hmm.
Or faster. So what can we do? And let's have some ideas, because I really want to come with a solution out of this that simply says, city, Matt, please, based on the input from this and what the council agrees to, this is what we want to do and how we want to do it, because you have a voice in this conversation.
A lot of people talk to, their idea is just a four-way stop with crosswalks.
And
They don't
if-
seem to support that.
And if the council basically agrees with that, here's what Dr. Perrin said, Gary. If the council simply says, let's put a four-way stop in there as it originally was proposed, all Matt has to do is tell Ross, put a four-way stop. the experts are saying is, we don't suggest you do that, but to be honest with you, they're advisors. The decision is the city. And if that's the decision, walked out of this meeting is put a four-way stop, and that's what we agree, then I'm indicating to you, the council simply says, I think we move in that direction, then a four-way stop goes in. But please understand, they have to, we hire them to be a consultant to tell us things that we just don't know.
I understand.
And if you
You
heard,
know more about traffic than I do, I get
well,
that.
and if the decision is to do that, we'll do that. So before we go on to the next one, Doctor, you have anything else you want to share before we open to public comment?
No, it was essentially, it was just talking about the different, like, here's a sample traffic calming program that we would give to the city, but essentially you customize that so that you have the different steps. Because normally this is meant to be more of a general policy where essentially if a neighborhood has concerns, it's not responding necessarily to one person, but the neighborhood would get together and say, hey, we have a concern and we would like something done. Otherwise, if it's one person, you end up pitting it against each other in terms of saying, it's not going to be unanimous, but you also don't want to go off one. So it's kind of like they have recommendations of, okay, if you get 10, 20, whatever number of people to say, yeah, we have a concern and we want to do something about it, then there's petitions, there's applications, but ultimately, again, the city's responsibility is to go out and actually measure, because unfortunately speeding is somewhat a perception as well. So until, and what we base it on, because I don't live in the neighborhood, I don't sell traffic circles, I don't do any of that stuff. So my job is, the responsibility is to follow the procedures. We collect data. We go out there with the radar guns. We don't go out with the police or speed trailer. We go out there and sit in a parked car with the radar gun and collect this data. We do it before the intersection, at the intersection, after the intersection. We did that before. We did that when the traffic circle was in there. We measured that 92% of people tapped their brakes as they went through that intersection. Even though the perception is nothing happened, I can rely on my data that I collected. And that's how we decided, actually that's working. The average speed was 4 miles an hour less. The speed tonight, and I wasn't able to do statistical, is higher than it was before the traffic circle went in, because when you tear something out, it's just naturally that people go, oh, I don't need to worry about that and that speeding anymore.
When did you collect the data? Just right after the circle was put in?
No, we wait for a month before so people get used to it. Huh?
It hasn't been a month since it's come out.
No, not when it came out, when it went in.
Oh.
Yeah, no, when it went in, you wait at least a month for that. When it comes out, it's interesting to see how people respond immediately to it.
Cheers while they go through.
Huh?
That's what I did, Sharon.
Did you wave to me tonight?
I,
But no, I mean, and that's what's expected. So now we've gone back to that higher speed than what it was then it's higher now than what it was when it was in there. So since we've taken out the traffic circle, speeds have gone up. That's just the reality.
Okay, anything else you want to share before
No,
we?
I think that was it. It was mainly just kind of going through that. There's my question slide. But it was mainly just saying that these can be fairly involved. So this is a 3-page plan on the process, and you try to put time so it doesn't take a year to determine if you're going to do some of these things.
No, if you have some
Yeah,
things
so-
for Dr. Perrin or anybody else, please.
That took me longer than I thought, so really that's what I was here for, is to try to give you, hopefully, insight.
I want to offer my support to you. I am a certified Six Sigma black belt. I suspect you know what that is. I will tell you, regardless of what you think, observed, what's the term? No. Observed anecdotes is not statistical evidence. You are in a single location observing at one time. You need 200 of you for a city of this size, population, about, to create statistical data. I will trust statistical data as long as it is collected correctly, as long as the design of experiments is correctly organized, that the data is collected correctly, that it is analyzed correctly. You get solid results I would stake my life on, period. You are correct.
Please.
So I myself am here to get some information, so I'm not offering an opinion on what the device is, but in the conversation, it sounds like people are thinking we can have stop signs or we can have calming circles. We hated the calming circles, so we took them out, so therefore the stop sign is the only option. But yet we're coming here, I'm just saying this from what I'm hearing in conversation, but yet we came here and we say there's many options. I just wanted to state, I want people to think about all the options, not immediately narrow it down to one.
And that's a great comment. And I mean, I apologize, I should have done this up front. This is really important to us, and your input's really important, but we need to make it up close and personal. If a question comes up from an individual that says, I'd really like to get some feedback on that, then to do that, I need your name and your address. And by having your name and address helps us now to simply focus back to you if we need to provide you personally a response that you're asking us that we weren't able to do that. So when you do talk, if you just give us your name and address, the recorder will pick it up, and then what we'll do is we'll make sure if it's a question for us to come back, set up an appointment, let's sit down and talk, then we know who to contact to make that happen. So, question.
My name is Taurus Brand. I live at 6019 South, 3850 West. It is a diverter street off of 6000 that goes to an Ivory development in Clinton. Okay. For those of you who are familiar with 6000, from 1900 to 3500, it's a 35 mile an hour speed limit. At 3500 to 4300, it changes to 25. It is the same road all the way down. Okay? We've had enforcement in the last few weeks and few months. They've wrote a few tickets. Anecdotally, one of them for 80 miles an hour on that road. The police officer impounded the guy's car. Good deal. Okay? Wrote him a big ticket. But they have started, since we have enforcement down at the end of the street, they've started diverting through our neighborhood where these people live, okay? And it is a small street, more narrow than 6000. So I have a question. How do we go about analyzing to whether or not we should change the speed limit on 6000?
Typically, it's the 85th percentile speed. So again, we do a speed study or evaluation on there because I think that was reduced primarily because most of the people that were, so to the west of 35th, or excuse me, to the east of 35th West is actually a bypass lane for 56. Now 56 is hopefully being widened in the future, but right now people come off the freeway, jump down 19th because they don't want to deal with 56 and run up 6,000. And then a lot of them peel off at 35th because 6,000 only goes over to 43rd?
43.
Yeah, 4,300. And that was also kind of a half-width road. I think it's being improved now because of the Ivory Homes, so it's a smaller road and more of a residential because really the 6,000 between 19th and 35th is more of the higher volume. It's like 9,000
fields and farms. There is now a development at 4,300. There's 89 units in my HOA at 3,500, 6,000. So that's a lot more.
So the determination is because to the east of 3,500, it's carrying about 9,000 cars, so it's truly a collector. But there from 35 to 43rd, it's more of just that local traffic, so it's more of a residential street. But if you were going to increase the speeds, typically what you would be doing is an 85th percentile, and then you kind of say that. Because by default, we try to keep all of our residential streets at 25 miles an hour. If it's considered a collector, because there's three classes really. You have arterials, collectors, and local or residential streets. Those local streets serve the neighborhoods that should lead to collectors. Those collectors lead to arterials. In this particular case of 57, it's more acting as a collector. So that's why I say as one option here is to just kind of say it's a collector. It really should be more of the 30 miles an hour. 6,000 would be another example. If you were thinking of this, you do an 85th percentile speed analysis, you'd say, you know, this is really functioning as a collector because neighborhoods feed to it and it leads to our 35th West, which is our arterial. So is 30 more of an appropriate speed? And so you can address it a couple different ways. Because a lot of people think, well, there's a driveway that goes onto it. Well, that doesn't make it a residential street. It's how it's functioning. How much volume it carries, and is it serving as the feeder to the arterials? And so we ran into this on a lot of things of people. Sometimes it's kind of like, well, if it has a house on it, you think it's residential. 35th West has houses right onto it, so I would never call that a residential street.
Okay. Other questions?
Darren Albright, I live 3690 West, 50 South. It's just a suggestion. I kind of thinking outside the box here. It's never been mentioned. When I was in Brazil, we got a ticket for going this far with a little white line, a camera, and they sent a picture of me in the car going over the white line. And I had to pay for a ticket in Brazil. My point is, what if you use that little whatever thing it is with the speedometer and put cameras there? If people start getting hit in their pocketbooks with a picture, you wouldn't have to be standing there And you can move that periodically, so people start thinking this is 25 miles an hour. I don't know.
So, that's speed enforcement. Speed enforcement is still illegal in Utah. Other states, they do that. Normally, it's red light running cameras or other things that you'll see. This is hearsay, but I heard we had it legally for a while where you'd have cars on the side of the roads and they'd get that. And then some legislator got a picture in the mail with his speeding ticket with somebody that wasn't his wife next to him, and we don't allow radar or CCTV cameras at all anymore in the state of Utah. That's what I've heard. That's hearsay. But technically, right now, you're not allowed to use camera enforcement for, it has to be actually presented by a police officer. That's my understanding. I don't know if you could.
Again, Taurus Brand, can this information be put on the website so it can be shared with the public?
Oh, yeah.
Because I had quite a group of homeowners at our last meeting for this reason, and I would like to be able to direct them to that so they can get some information so they'd be better informed.
We'll do that.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh,
Sorry, lady, you had a question?
How much do those traffic speed light up things, how much does that decrease speeding?
Their effectiveness
Yeah.
of the feedback signs?
Yeah.
They tend to be, it depends on the population of the driver, because you have the one side that says, well, if you put it right there on 48th at the high school, I would say, people would say, well, can I max it out and see if 99 becomes 100? So you have to, but if it's conscientious drivers, those are the ones that I'm just not paying attention, I'm talking on the phone, heading home, I do this route every day, so I'm not paying attention. Your speeds are just kind of creeping up because it's a wide road. Those are when it's most effective, because then it kind of comes back and they go, oh shoot, I'm speeding, and they slow down. That's when it's effective. If people are just kind of like, and this is where if it's cut through, or in the case of 57 specific, if they're heading to the park, they don't live in the neighborhood, sometimes they get ignored. And so really, that's where those are nice, because you try those, and those are something that, hey, like I think I said this earlier, if the city bought 3 or something and said, well, we're going to see if they're effective, you put them out there and you see if they're effective and they continue. Because what you normally see is a week to 2 weeks of effectiveness, and then they drop off. And so that's why lots of times we move these around more as a reminder to neighborhoods as opposed to permanent installations. But if this was a higher volume, because this is a fairly low volume road, if this was a higher volume road, like one of the true collectors, like maybe 31st West, is maybe a little more of the citywide collector, then you might put that mid-block as a reminder, because between 56 and 48, we've got a long stretch there where those might be effective too. This serving the park, you have people that are coming there besides the neighborhood, it may be effective, but that's where it's kind of like,
People get used to it.
they get used to them and sometimes they desensitize to them. It's kind of like when we put a crosswalk in, we don't like just that flashing all the time because people that get desensitized, whereas if they're pet activated, then the people, they kind of do that. And that's where what we're going to on these speed feedback signs is if you're not going over, we don't want it always telling you your speed unless you're speeding. And so if you're going, and you can set those, so if say speed limit is 25, it's like, well, if you're 28, we're not going to give it to you. That way you really know to pay attention when it shows up because it's dynamic that way. So maybe we set it at 29. Not that I'm encouraging speeding at 25, but you can do that because again, these are behavioral things that we're trying to influence, not everybody responds the same way.
Chris, right there. Toby?
We have a son that lives in Clinton, just off of 3,000 west and about 900 north.
Okay.
And in Clinton, they redid that whole road along there, from Roy into Clinton. And they have put the traffic circle in. They're bigger than the one that we had on the...
Aren't those roundabouts? I think those are actually roundabouts.
They're roundabouts.
Yeah.
Okay, they're roundabouts. And so we travel over there quite often. They have one speed limit sign that tells you what the speed limit is. Then below it, it tells you what your speed is.
Right. And that's typically on the speed feedback signs.
Okay, that's a
that we
speed
were just
feedback
talking about.
sign.
That's a speed feedback sign. You can set those to either be blank and let you know if you're speeding, or as soon as you go above 25, it might tell you. But normally you have the speed limit sign and the feedback sign, because otherwise you're just telling them what their speed is, and they don't, and they may not know what the speed limit is.
That's right. And
so they go together.
Let me tell you two things. What it's done for me, because we travel over there quite a bit, and when we go through that traffic circle and then roundabout, and we travel, and I see that every time, and it has controlled my speed just because it's there, and I see it all the time. And then we go over often enough where we see other people driving there. And they are, and they've obviously noticed it too, and we've seen a lot of people. We've also seen people pulled over and given tickets along there. But in my opinion, that procedure has worked very well for Clinton.
And the reason for those typically where you would place those is because roundabouts, if they're designed properly, are designed that you basically go 22 miles an hour through. Not traffic circles, roundabouts. The roundabouts are an intersection control device, so we have enough volume that we need to spend that money to actually modify, have a roundabout. And when you go through there, you go through, because it slows you down on the approach. Lots of times you'll see 15 miles an hour, as your circulatory speed, but typically they're designed at this magic 22 miles an hour speed. Because our design speed's always more than our posted speed typically. But the idea is because people then accelerate out, and in that case, you're heading into the city center, right?
Well, we're going north or south.
Oh, you're going south. Okay.
Along 3000 west.
Okay. So the idea is people tend to accelerate out of those, and so those feedback signs are good reminders that say, hey, don't accelerate too much. And so on the departure of those roundabouts, it's sometimes nice to have those because lots of times, because roundabouts, we don't recommend above, but up to 35 miles an hour you can put them on there. And so essentially you're slowing down through the roundabout, just the geometrics, but then we don't want people necessarily speeding, thinking it's back up again. Particularly if it really, no, we really want 25 or 30, but that natural tendency is, okay, I went through the obstacle, now let me speed back up a little bit.
Isn't a roundabout the most expensive thing?
No, actually it depends on, because where that comes into place is if you're retrofitting an existing intersection and you have to buy right of way, because you can't fit a roundabout. But if you're out somewhere and doing that, roundabouts are curb gutter sidewalks. You have no maintenance, you have no steel, you don't have anything. So in theory, if it's not right of way on new developments or you have right of way, roundabouts should be cheaper. And they also have options of mini roundabouts.
One just got granted $700,000 for the one.
That's because you're going through the federal process. I'll tell you what, if you're not going through the federal highways and asking for CMAQ money, and
you're not asking for CMAQ,
then you, because again, it's right of way, but it's curb and gutter. I mean, that's what we're putting, and whatever, I mean, maybe you've got a $250,000 land or statue in the center. But yeah, they are very expensive, unfortunately, but it's usually expensive.
Sorry, right here. Oh, name and address, please.
Emily Atkinson, 2544 West, 4400 South. About a month ago, we had a car go through our mailbox and a couple of our neighbors' yards, took out a lot of landscaping in the process. Right where your 4400 curves down and starts going downhill.
Don't we have a couple on your street?
We've actually we've sent some emails, some photos. In the 13 years I've lived there, my mailbox has been taken out 6 times. We've had 3 cars that have gone through my yard and the neighbors' yards.
You're right on the outside of the curve?
Yeah, on the north side.
My neighbors to the left of me have put in steel poles to protect the front of their house.
Because they've actually had somebody go into their house before.
Right. So the city changed the road when that happened, and basically it directs them at our house now, and everybody else that lives 2 houses below us. I'm not blaming, I'm just saying that's what happened, okay?
We just, what's
Are
our
these slide offs or
recommendation?
just speed related?
All of it. It's
Slide-offs
speed and speed, because the speed limit, obviously, on 4400, it's a straight, long road, it's 25. When they get to the hill, they're supposed to change to 20. Everybody's doing 40 by the time they get to that hill, and it's flying down there. So, I mean, you talk about people being afraid to be in their front yards. We're afraid to be in our front yards. People are coming down that hill so fast, you got to stop and look and see what's happening. Especially if you're out there shoveling in the wintertime. I'm sorry, I apologize. It's a dangerous area. You know what I mean?
So that would be something we would look at, but those tend to be when you have both vertical and horizontal changes, where you want to take a step back, so further up the road, really let people know. That even though probably most of the people driving that have driven it before.
I don't disagree. I mean, it does work as a pass-through because I know people are passing through there, but there's a lot of residents, obviously, who are using the street too. I've had my neighbors end up in my yard.
And that
it's unfortunate.
That curves down, it hits 2650.
Right, that's a dead end, it dead ends this way and then goes out to 4,800,
And
yes.
at some point, that's going to probably, or at least in the master plan, that continues up to 40th and goes by the track station. And that's going to be a collector road. So those would be one of those cases where you take a look and you kind of go back and say, how do we slow them down before they get to that vertical thing? So we go 300 feet back upstream, and then we start thinking about chokers. We start thinking about the speed feedback signs, but if they're going that fast, sometimes that's just, they're cutting through.
Yeah.
Because that could be some cut through traffic. If, you know, I don't want to mess with the high school because high school's letting out, so I'm coming down 44th and then
Right,
cutting
well, you
through
got
or something
the
like
high
that.
school, you got the junior high, you got 2 elementary schools right there, you know, I mean, I live right across the street where the kids are, I mean, basically they cross the street right in front of my house to go up to the elementary school. There's no intersection right there, and you gotta really watch because those cars are coming down the hill fast, and so it's dangerous right there.
So I think, again, we don't pick any traffic calming because that's very site-specific when we look at things. But I'm pretty sure in the master plan, there's 2 or 3. Is there 2? Two
right
along
there.
that section that we were saying. And
Okay.
it typically is the bookend. I mean, everybody's kind of turning onto 44th through 19th, so you don't start it too early. You want to have that effectiveness, so you kind of pick the spot. But again, if we went with something like speed humps, usually it's a corridor thing. So even though we show 2, that doesn't mean you put 2 speed humps on there because, again, spacing is what's important. So for example, the traffic circle that was on 57th was 1 of 3 that were planned along the corridor to, again, you know, kind of have influence on the whole corridor, not just one intersection mid-block, because then you slow things down there, and normally you'll get higher speeds on either side of it.
Right in front of our house, where the angle of the road leads cars right directly into our mailbox through the top tier of our yard and into our neighbor's yard. If you follow the road angle right there.
I mean, we just had
Slow it
some,
down.
it
Yeah.
wasn't speeding, they were speeding, but it was criminals
Yeah,
that
yeah.
crashed right there, but that's
Not the first
not
time.
the first time, it wasn't, not all just criminals, I mean, we had a criminal, this is the last time that, and we're waiting for our wall to be still fixed, I'm waiting for the shirts, but we had a drunk driver one time lose control and went through all of our neighbors' houses and our house. You know, we've had our garbage can knocked clear down the street where I'm like, where the heck is my garbage can? You know what I mean? Because people just are going so fast and they jerk
They
right
jerk
there
it.
at our house where the corner is.
So if that
so.
corner was, I will say we don't design for drunk drivers and we don't design for.
I told you the extenuating circumstances.
Right.
Listen, the 6 people that hit my mailbox were not drunk.
Right.
You know what I mean? That took my mailbox out, they were just driving down the street.
And Mayor,
So,
I think it's appropriate for us to take a look at that
Yeah, I was just
specifically.
going to talk to Matt.
Well, it's,
Let us take a look at that. This
It's
may be an
icy.
opportunity, if there's a way by which we can slow that down using a type of device that's very effective.
super.
And then invite the neighborhood to become part of that discussion, because you're experiencing it personally, but I'll bet you a lot of them in that area is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe we can come up with a solution that will work for that community that is
Absolutely.
different than maybe some other one.
Sure.
And as Toby mentioned in his conversation, he's saying is, I like the dynamic speed indicator. If the group basically believes that may be the best option at that location, then maybe we put and look at putting a dynamic speed indicator at that location to help us, you know, balance the need particular to that. But yours seems like the uniquely, and if it's unique, maybe there's another solution that we ought to consider.
Sure.
You okay with that,
That's what
Matt?
we're hoping for,
Would you
is
make
some
sure we
sort of
get-
solution.
Make sure we get your name and address, and
Yeah.
then let's see if we can do something to help you.
Absolutely, perfect.
We
Thank you.
appreciate that.
So that would be other feedback, because horizontal, vertical curve combinations are, upstream is where we tend to slow things down. Where wide, long streets where you, are where we tend to see speed problems too. So when we went through, we kind of tried to identify those, but that doesn't mean that we catch them all. So this is, again, if we develop a traffic calming program, there's a process in that, okay, the neighborhood's got together, it feels like there's a problem. We evaluate it to see if it's perception or reality. Then we start the discussion of what are the most appropriate solutions.
Perfect. Name and phone address, please.
Jamie Larson, 5574 South, 3750 West.
Thank you.
So I'd be fine with what is it called, the signal indicator or whatever, pumps. The circle was dangerous for, as pedestrians, I brought that up. We had some issues with the people cutting across, and that, obviously it's not an issue anymore, so we won't go there. But I did have one question. So I get, with the whole stop sign thing, you're saying it's not for speed, it has to be warranted and we decided on a stop sign. Was it ever looked at if it was warranted at that location where we have all the pedestrian traffic?
Yeah.
Because there's all the school bus that stops and all that.
It was looked at, it's not. An all-way stop is typically based on volumes and disparity between the number of the vehicles, and so you take, just like traffic signals have warrants, you don't just kind of say, even though it may make sense, oh, traffic signals should go there. There's a warrant process, and I will say, no offense to the lawyers, that's what drives it, is the legality of, we have to have this warrant met to put it in, otherwise if there's an accident, because now you're going to have, by nature, if you put an all-way stop, there is a tendency to have more rear-end collisions for now 57. You weren't stopping it before, now you're stopping it, even though somebody may not be paying attention. It's kind of like you put a traffic signal in, you may avoid those T-bone intersections that have more severe incidents, but you will have higher rear-end collisions, just people not paying attention. And now you're stopping the main flow of traffic. And that's when the attorneys come out and go, where's your warrant? Oh, you didn't, then you helped contribute to this accident. It's not a common sense thing, it's a legal thing.
I see, and I get that. That is frustrating, I think, to most people. That I mean, I get the liability thing in the CPA, so I get where liability comes into a lot of decisions. But even that traffic calming circle, like a lot of problems we had was with the people cutting across, and even me, when I almost got hit in the front because I live on the street where I'd stop at the stop sign and people flying out around, almost taking your front end of your car. That happened multiple times. Or I'd be stopped and I'd go around to make my left turn all the way around, and you've got someone all of a sudden come flying through and cut the left-hand turn and almost T-boned me. So, I mean, obviously that was...
Well, and I think the concern would be that some of this is in education. It's not a roundabout.
Yeah.
So if you have a stop sign and the other direction doesn't, if you don't yield to them, that's still your fault.
Well, no, I was stopped.
Okay.
What I'm talking, so, okay.
So I thought you were talking about cutting the left turn off sign.
Okay, so if you're at the stop sign,
Right.
you'd be stopped there, and then people would come flying around and almost take you out while you're sitting there at the intersection. That happened to a lot of our
Yes,
neighbors,
yes.
almost getting hit. But then, okay, I've got someone behind me at the stop sign. I take my left-hand turn, I've got my signal, there's no one coming the other direction.
Okay.
I go around the circle, they cut incorrectly to the legal left-hand turn and almost take me out the side. That happened nearly multiple times, so.
So again, that's an illegal movement. It'd be kind of like if you didn't have the circle there and somebody decided to do that. It's the same. I mean, we don't design for stupidity, unfortunately.
Please, name and address, please.
Deanne Chaston, gotta think of my address, 3751 West, 5575 South.
Thank you.
Okay, what I heard in the timeline and your presentation, that there's a program, there's stages, there's steps. Okay, I want us to be like little babies again and take the little steps. I feel like you went way up here and you didn't do anything down here.
Understand.
I want, and I go through that intersection 4, 5, 6, 7 times a day. I want what you talk about, visibility. Let's see something. Stripe the road, stripe it narrower. Okay, have we talked about that there's an LDS church on one corner? How many pedestrians do you have going to an LDS church? Stripe a crosswalk. Is that not visible? Is that not against, I don't want to break traffic rules by hitting a pedestrian. Take some paint, put it on the road, take a baby step. Don't go clear up here with this traffic calming. We don't have to talk about it, it's gone. What do we do? Yes, let's do something. I'm all about doing something. Why don't we try striping it?
Okay.
Or these flashing stop signs, maybe we can't do the four-way stop. Then the flashing indicator. Let's think visually and try it. Show us it doesn't work before you put in something big again. That's
fine.
what I have to say.
And I appreciate your comment on that, and that's why we're here, because if you're basically saying that you believe this device works, it meets the standard, it helps us to get the visibility out, then we need that input, and then we'll take that input and we'll see if we can't make that happen. But to your question about putting stripes on there, so we have crosswalks, that's easy, okay?
And cheap, I would
And
think.
cheap, you're right. Back here, first
There.
name
There.
and name and address, thank you.
He's got the learning.
5931 South, 3750 West, sorry.
Thank you.
I travel the intersection. For people that live there, the biggest problem with the common circle is it was so tight to try to make turns. even tiny cars can't make turns. You have a travel trailer, work trailers, anything, nobody could go around. Nobody can make the turn. School buses, there's 3 or 4 school bus stops there. My kids have to walk to the LDS church to catch the bus. They've been hit several times, almost every morning. My opinion, and I'm just a stupid resident, but if you're gonna put a circle in the middle of the road and maybe multiple down the road, offset them some so it's more of a slalom course that will slow people down. Teenagers, yeah, they're gonna want to slalom it and make it fun, but instead of just the circle, the speeding was more the straight through. And they didn't have to go around the circle, they didn't have to anything, because it was still could go straight through. Offset it or something so they have to actually slow down to go around.
There you go. Okay. Ms. Chadburn, let me just make it clear, and I think I can speak for at least the city side of this. Traffic calming circles are no longer a vocabulary, okay? I think we got a clear
you
message.
see an option back there for them, do you?
No. There's no option. We may talk about roundabouts, but we're not going to talk about circles. Again,
The chicanes is, I think, what you're talking about.
chicanes are perfect. There was one right here.
Yeah, we need to get this gentleman.
And address, thank you.
Robin Arnold, 5898 South, 3650 West. I have one question for you, Doctor, and then some comments. Question is, when you was talking about your research, that you sat there and you said there was, what was the percentage of people that had actually slowed down through that intersection on 5700?
It was approximately, well, no, I said what, so the change was 4 miles an hour slower, was actually the speed, the 85th percentile had changed to that.
85%, that's what I was asking.
Well, that's the 85th percentile speed.
Okay.
What I said was about approximately 92% were actually, you could measure that tapped their brakes as they went through there. So they had some indication that they had to slow down.
Okay, my question is, in that study, was the amount of people that made the turn, left-hand turn there, was that in consideration there?
No, that's not how you measure the 85th percentile.
Well, that should be, because everybody that's going to make that turn is going to slow down. Everybody that's not is not. If you've got
That's not how we do speed
well,
studies.
but it should be, is what I'm saying. They're going to slow down to make that turn, whether that circle is there or not. That should be part of the...
Well, unfortunately, that's not the standard practice because you artificially lower and you say there's not a speeding problem then. Because all of a sudden, all these turns that are happening at 15 miles an hour bring that average down. And so that's just not how standard practice is done. That's not how the federal highways recommend you do it. Nobody in the U.S. would do a speed study that way because you're watering down your problem, basically, if you do it that way.
But you're getting a more accurate count. Okay, second, all right, speaking of speed, you know, we are a society of lawbreakers. Honestly, we are.
Where's the chief?
He's right
now. We are a society of lawbreakers, and the problem, what's the whole problem we're here for? Speeding.
Right.
You know, we have a law enforcement staff that I'm very proud of, actually, but why can't we enforce the speeding laws? You say, well, we may not have, you know, I've heard comments that say that we don't have the manpower. You know, you write a ticket. We're also a society of money. And I'll tell you what, if you write the tickets, I would say the majority of people that go down 5700, and they just don't speed down 5700, they speed down every street in our city. On my street, they make that corner at 40 miles an hour all day long. It isn't just 5700. It's the city, it's the society, and we accept the speed. If we start ticketing and making them pay. I mean, the first offense, yeah, X number of dollars for it. The second one triples. You will slow them down. I'll guarantee you. We are a society of wallets, and that will happen.
And that is, thanks for your comment, that is an option that's always there because there's...
But we're not using it.
I don't know the enforcement policy in terms of how often you do speed enforcement as a response, but typically enforcement is an option. Calming is something that's there 24/7, and I think that is where if the city decides they're going to pursue a calming, it's because you have a recurring problem on an area that you can't address with a device or striping or a feedback sign that in theory would help address that without posting a cop 24/7 there. Because the reality is you can't do that. And so what you're trying to address is, hey, we want to do something. Because you're right, the other option, there's the do nothing option, there's the we're going to rely on enforcement option, there is the hey, we're just going to raise the speed limit because it's functioning more like this, and this is what people naturally want to go. And then you get into the traffic calming devices. So it's really a policy decision of how the city wants to proceed with those things.
Sean back there. Sean,
Yeah.
your name and address, please.
Sean Chadbourne, 5931 South, 3750 West. We're done with the calming circle, obviously.
Thank you.
The speeding has increased. I travel that road multiple times a day. But we have our city police officers, thank goodness they're around. But when they're not around, what's wrong with bringing the county and even the state? You know, they have jurisdiction in our county.
You can try, but they won't do that.
Well, it might be worth trying something. You know, we're raising taxes to help bring in more police officers. I read something today. We're down 7 police officers what we had a few years ago. Yet our taxes are going up to higher new ones. They don't get paid enough for what they do, I agree. But something does need to happen. Speed humps, yeah, they'll give you a heck of a jar when you go down there. But when the circle was there, I had to sit and wait for a bunch of teenagers that went and laid in the middle of the road because they thought it was a pretty fun.
We don't decide
And
for
they give me the
teenagers.
bird.
Oh, God.
So if you put your stripes down, maybe put a couple of speed humps a little further down there to help speed that and the indicators. It's all money. I realize that. We're already paying for it. But if we do something now beyond that thing that was there, it's going to be better for all of us.
Okay. Thanks, I appreciate that. Comment, name, first name and address?
She's raising her hand for me because
Oh, thank you.
Chris Lewis, 5126 South, 3550 West. I do not even live in any of the areas that these little calming devices are scheduled for. But I frequent my friends' houses that live in that area, so I'm familiar with them. And I'll be honest with you, that little whatever it was didn't really do much, but it's a big problem on that street. Everybody knows that. I think each point in the city is a little different, like this gentleman, you know, on 4400. You know, it's different than the situation on 5700.
Exactly.
My concern is, and maybe this comes from my small business background, let's do it right. Let's not go, oh, this will work, and because it's cheaper, or because this person said it would work. Let's just do it right. Let's make sure we're doing it right, so we're not spending money to put it in, and then all of a sudden, it comes out with funds that nobody knows where they came from. It's gone. Who paid for that? We just move money around? I mean, I don't do that in my business. I mean, we don't just keep raising prices because we need more money. We do it right the first time, or at least we try to. And that's what seemed to me it didn't happen. And that's my concern. So the cost and the effectiveness, and every situation is going to be different. I think people that live around those areas need to be, you know, all the input needs to come from just that. And I forget the name of them, so help me out. It's the flat speed bumps that have a crosswalk on them, whatever those are
Speed
called.
tables.
We came out of Cabela's the other night. There's one right there, one in Farmington. And I turned to my husband, I said, well, what's wrong with doing this? Now, from a public works perspective, I don't know. Everybody says, well, you can't plow.
No, they're plowable.
Okay.
If they're designed properly, they're plowable.
Here's
It's a
why,
drainage issue.
here's why I
when
think
they
that we
retro.
work in a number of cases. Number one, people care about their cars. You've got stupid teenagers doing stupid things, but boy, they care about those cars. Their rooms are trash, but their cars are shiny with the, you know what I'm saying? And we care about our pocketbooks. So we either enforce it by, and granted, we're down police officers, so how do we do that? But in your pocket or your personal property. If your personal property or your pocketbook's affected, it's gonna solve the problem.
Good comment.
That's all I-
Time?
No, I want
Yeah,
to say
comment? Just name and address, please.
Tony Trimble, 3573 West, 5700 South. I've kind of kept quiet, probably quiet that I shouldn't have been. My biggest concern is something that, and I could be wrong, but I don't think I've heard the word today in this meeting. That is children, okay? I really don't care about, and this is just me, and I hope nobody takes it personal, but I don't really care so much about your trailers or your whatever. And I don't have the answer. You guys are more professional than me. But something's got to be done, because let me just give you an example, and this has happened twice. I come west down 57, and I'm just right there, so I turn my blinker on to go left into my driveway, okay, 25 mile an hour. You get people, one time it was kids, one other time it was a gentleman, and my blinker's on. I'm turning into my driveway. They are so in a hurry, they come around me this way, catch the front of my bumper, and now my bumper's out like this in front of my truck. Okay? That's fine. I get a new bumper. Okay? My mailbox can be hit 3 times, but you know what? That's all right too, because I can redo my mailbox. Okay? And I realize, and I can only sympathize with the home getting hit into, but what I'm saying is those things can be repaired. But if you got a little kid coming down, going down the sidewalk, heading over to 7-Eleven, and all of a sudden somebody's not going the speed limit, they're on their cell phone or whatever, you know, whatever the case may be, and they hit a kid and hurt the kid, or possibly even kill him, now we got a problem. I mean, that's a big problem. So I feel with you about trailers going around the loop-de-loops, and I feel for you for whatever your hang-up is about the calming circle or a roundabout. And like I said, I'm not really to argue what needs to be done, because I'm not a professional. But I can tell you right now, I see a lot of kids, just in the amount of time I'm out in front mowing and weed eating, coming down there, and the warmer it gets, the more they come. And it could be grandkids, it could be kids that live clear down by the park, okay? One other thing, and this is just a comment, okay? I know I live on that street, so I'm more apt to go up and go right down to the, just right down 57 to the stop sign. But I hear and I see a lot of people that are, and I know that the roundabouts are there, and that's all, I'm not saying it's my street, I'm just saying, okay? Why do people that live clear down by the park, or over south, or whatever, why don't they go and use the lights? They're so worried about 5700. Why don't they shoot down to 55, go up and hit that light, or 6000 and use that light? It seems like so many people want to gather up that street and line their cars clear down to my driveway at times to sit at a stop sign forever. Okay? I just want to be heard, because my biggest concern is young kids. And I've seen them. My kids have survived. We've been there for, what, over 20 years or whatever. My kids have survived and grown up. I see these other kids, and then I see these cars racing down. And just like these cars that are coming around hitting my bumper. One other example, and then I'll be quiet. Now, this is more of a personal thing. If it wouldn't have been for Darren here one time, I had some kids do the same thing that the guy did when he hit my bumper. So I pulled in my driveway, and it was in the summer, and I hollered something out of my window to them. And they heard it. There's a bunch of kids in a car, so they pull over. Okay, so meanwhile, I get out of my truck, and I'm standing on the sidewalk, and we're kind of sharing some words back and forth. And I went down there, and they were wanting to tangle, you know, and Darren pulled over, and we kind of worked things out. They were very disrespectful kids. What I'm saying is, that's another way people could get hurt, or find themselves in jail or something, by the tempers. And so, you know, I just think that sometimes we got to look at the most important thing, which is somebody getting hurt or killed.
Good comment. Appreciate it. Okay. Let's get a couple of them to speak, please. Your name and address, please.
My name's Amy. I live on 4358 South, 2150 West, over by Samruth Park. So we're scheduled for a calming device. It's on one of the things on 4400 and 2150 West. And I obviously have kids, and we cross that street over into the park all the time. Which one of these would be more like and also kids walk to school and all this stuff. I'm just curious about these because there's just tons and tons of pedestrians. So which one would be more beneficial and help more with that aspect?
So it depends on what you're trying to accomplish, and that's where we look at this, because if we're trying to just slow the traffic down because the kids are walking parallel to it in that area, then it's addressing which one affects the traffic the most. If it's because we have a crossing or we want to increase the crossings and have more opportunities for crossing points, then we would take a look at which one combined those two. So a speed table might be more appropriate if you're going to add crosswalks. It's just when you add crosswalks, particularly if it's school zone, you have other considerations of, is it on the safe route to school plan? Do you need a crossing guard now? Some of those other things that go into that, you can't just say, oh, yeah, let's put crosswalks everywhere. And that's the other thing is we don't have crosswalks kind of along this. So is there a plan to add crosswalks? And then that might factor into these other things. When we started, it was purely a speed issue. We wanted to slow things down. And so when we took a look at those things and what the data says are the most prolific ones for that particular corridor, that's what kind of came out with that. But if we were evaluating something different, like say, for example, if someone brought up, let's look at everything, let's do it right the first time or type of thing, we would say, do we want crosswalks in here? I don't know that was ever part of the discussion. Because to me, it was a speeding issue. That's what we wanted to address, not increase connectivity in the neighborhood or something like that.
Well, right. I mean, and speeding is an issue. I mean, but like, there's also kids there's a crosswalk, but then there's also tons of made crosswalks that kids cross, on that street all the time that they don't necessarily cross at the crosswalk. So it's a concern in speeding as well.
And that's a great comment because that's also kind of part of the thing. When we talk about, well, it's just paint, it's easy. Well, paint typically with our snowplows means it has to be done every year. And we're trying to come up with a citywide policy. So the question is, how much are we going to put into our budget for these things? Because we're just talking about one street primarily here tonight. This can be something that, as things come up, could be every street in the city. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that the whole idea is that we have a process in place to look at these different streets throughout the city so that everyone kind of gets an opportunity and we're addressing those concerns. And so, particularly with crosswalks, we don't just throw them in at every intersection. Because in residential areas, the nice thing is we don't stripe them because if we can keep the speeds down, then crossing at corners is relatively safe. It's when the speeds come up, and that magic paint, if the speeds are still higher, doesn't protect the kids anymore.
And that's interesting you talk about that, because when we talked about 5700, pedestrian traffic was one of the big things, because you have 3 school buses there, you got a church there, you had multiple different things. We addressed speeding, but really, we probably should have addressed, should we put in pedestrian crosswalks?
Exactly. And that's a good point, because in theory, your school buses, because a lot of people, they're school kids, so their school buses are moving stop signs.
Yeah, they are.
And so in theory, we have that stop sign there, so when we think about, we need a stop sign, it's then, okay, are we sure all the kids are coming to one area?
I witnessed an individual walking across the street, not at that intersection, but coming across, so they're coming up to the bus, just about get hit one morning. There's not a lot of light in that intersection. You've got kids crossing at 7 o'clock in the morning. I mean, that's really what kind of generated it, was talking about pedestrian safety, but we went after the speed part. There's also the pedestrian safety.
And the reason we typically...
Just as with her area right up there.
Yeah, the reason we tend to address, because if we can address speed, then, because I'll be honest, you do not want to crosswalk at every intersection along this corridor.
No, that's not.
Or try to do one at every intersection and every mid-block or something. And so that's where it's kind of like, the idea is why we tend to go towards speeding is because, well, if we can get speeding down, then the kids that cross wherever they want to cross, at least they're dealing with 25 miles. Because we know, a pedestrian vehicle interaction at 20 or 25 miles an hour has this much, you don't know my scale, so I can say this much, probability of having a serious injury or death. But as soon as you get to 30, 35, 40, that exponentially goes up. And so
what about a raised intersection with crosswalks? You're only talking a couple of them along the corridor. I mean, maybe in that one there at 5700 and maybe hers, raised intersection with crosswalks in the raised intersection, and then you do something else. Is it appropriate to do multiple different things on a corridor?
You can definitely.
So you do a raised intersection here, and partway down you do the flashing light.
You definitely can mix and match these things. Again, it's more of.
I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all.
No, and each device has its strengths and weaknesses, and so what you do is you take a look at that. But if you had this common intersection, say it's the 3750, that, no, this intersection is where everybody congregates to, and so we want to address pedestrians as well here, we might pick a different treatment than just, hey, there's a speeding down here in this section closer to the park. We don't really have crossings, it's at the canal or whatever. We just want to slow people down. And so, yeah, you can definitely mix and match these along the corridor when you think of it that way. Yes.
Folks, I mean, we've heard a lot tonight of what you don't like, what you hate. But from a council perspective, you need to know what you want, what you desire at these locations. Specifically, this location. Master plan is a master plan. As Dr. Perry said, we can change things, different things wherever we want. We know we didn't do it right at this location for you guys, okay? We want to do it right now. So we need to hear from you what you desire there, what you would like there. Yes, it doesn't have to agree with the experts. That's okay. It's your neighborhood, our decision, that's what you guys make there. That's not an issue you should decide on. But as a council, we need to know what would you want there. We have a whole bunch of options. You come back with us and say, third of us want this, third of us want this, third of us want that. That doesn't help us very much, because we're back to the same place.
Flip a coin a couple times.
Okay, so that's a good point, please. Name and address, and then right behind you.
Sure. My name is Cindy Trimble, 3573 West, 5700 South. I have a question maybe that the council can help me with, and that is the calming circle went in with no public input. The calming circle came out with no public input, especially when we had a meeting set for tonight and it came out on a Saturday morning. So I'd like to know what was up with that.
Okay. I'll address that, Mayor.
Okay, take a shot. Tore it out.
All right, so as Blair said in the statement, we had a talk, let's put a stop sign, okay? City manager at the time says, he heard the experts, went there, and decided to go that route. Now, we need to understand, it's not the council's responsibility to say, have meetings and say, well, where are we going to put stop signs, yield signs, every single time. That's not the purpose of the council. That's the purpose of staff and their direction of what to do. So the city manager decided, I've listened to a few things, he made a decision that time. As it came out, all of this became a problem. Council got aware of it. We decided, hey, it's not going to stay there. We know it's not the right thing, so we decided to take it out.
Well, why are we here tonight then?
Because
What
we
to
did it
put in
wrong.
place?
We did it wrong.
Why are we here tonight?
What to put there instead?
This meeting's been on the calendar.
He just said it wasn't there, it wasn't.
There's
input.
7 other locations.
Right,
It's
I was
not
saying
just
at
about
this
this.
specific one time, if something gets this vocal, this problem, then the council will help and step in, and that's what we've done, right?
But I'm saying, like, how did that happen? Like, who said, like, all of a sudden on Saturday, we're not gonna wait till May 1st. We just want it out right this minute. Like, who started that conversation?
We had a, last council meeting, we had a meeting, then one of your citizens, one of your neighborhood people, Brandon, said a call, have a sit down, talk to Brandon. Will you go and see what the community would like? He supposedly reached out to the neighbors. I don't know if we did everybody or not.
No.
Maybe a few or not. He came back and suggested, hey, you know what? We don't know what we want. A lot of people prefer this, but everybody prefers to have the light pole taken.
So one person made that decision?
No, the council made the decision.
One
We talked,
person
and the council-
suggested it, and it was acted upon, without waiting for this meeting to happen.
Correct.
To get
That's the word.
everybody
It wasn't
else's
one person,
input.
but he said, he talked to the majority.
How many meetings did we all speak at? It wasn't one person.
Right, here's the
I
reality.
spoke twice.
Here's the reality, nobody liked that, so we, the council.
Now, how do you know nobody liked it though? Nobody asked me if I liked it.
We did have other meetings, but we were.
Maybe it's
But I didn't know about it.
Then you weren't watching the agenda.
I'm just, I'm giving you what you asked, how it
Meeting to
happened,
take
that's
it
how it
out.
happened.
There was no meeting.
If the calming,
Right. You're saying nobody liked it.
And that's why we're here, because we didn't do it.
But not- I'm not-
That's what
I'm
we're
saying not-
asking for what you guys want.
You can't say that not everybody didn't like it, is what I'm telling you.
All right, that's.
If he said that the calming circle worked, how come it was taken out before anything was?
Yeah, he even
Decided
says, he says it works.
Well.
So apparently he didn't have no say, huh?
The community didn't like it. Right.
So, just back.
In reality, it was also not designed greatly, you
It was the
guys.
design.
It was a poor design on our fault. We could have made it better.
Maybe you get elected next
Can I say
time.
something?
Okay.
Brandon, are you there when the UPS driver went around the circle?
and almost, and he went up on the curtain gutter and almost took out the bus kids. Who was there? Who seen that?
But the
I
thing
wasn't
is,
there.
it's not
Okay, so,
about
you know, they're gonna.
Well, I also know a guy that drove his trailer around that, and said he threw a trailer right around that.
Okay, let me
Bus driver that said that he
let me offer a thought.
No, I don't think the point is.
First thing is, I'm sorry, hold on. Thank you, okay? Here's the thing that's really important tonight, okay? I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't like the fact it was taken out. It should have been taken out tonight. This council was ready for tonight to do that. And I'm confident, had we come up with the most important conversation tonight would be is this. We don't want it, the council's agreed that we don't want it, so what do you want instead? And we never got, and we need to get to what's next. And we were going to use tonight as an opportunity to simply says, it isn't working to the level we hope for. There's a lot of community having some concerns with it. And what we really wanted to do was, it simply says the city is ready to remove it. And in removing it, what's next? And if you come in here and simply says, we think the right answer to this, what next would be is, I want a dynamic speed indicator, and you agree on 5700, that's the best option, or let's go with four-way stop signs, then that's the right option. Then we're going to listen, and then the council will make a modification if they have to the plan, and we will make that happen. Now, I can't explain to you the reason why it went out on Friday. I don't have a clue, okay? But the fact of the matter today, it's gone. And I do not like how it went out, and I will not like how it went out, but it's now gone. What I want you to help me with tonight, if you can, is to simply says, now that we got it moved, so that we try to provide the protection to the children and the people who walk that street, what do you think is a better solution now that we've got it out and we're ready to listen? And if you say that says, I think this is an option, this option, or if you simply say this, give us some walkways on the road, and most importantly, let's bring together the team who lives in that area one more time, and let's us work that out, because we've got lots of people from different areas that have good input. But let's talk to that group, and then let's come out of that discussion that says, I want a dynamic, and then we'll make arrangements to move to get a dynamic indicator. Or if the case would be in your neighborhood that simply says, I think a table will work. It helps Ross to fundamentally go ahead and use his plows in there in the winter, so we can do something really effective to help reduce the speed. And if your community says, we think that's the right solution, then let's do that for you. But we need your input to help us to define what is right for each community and help us to do that. And two things I want to make sure we clearly understand. That this city is not going to basically put another calming device in this city without your input, and we will not remove another device in the city without your input. We have to listen to what you're asking us and what's important. Because I'm telling you right now, some groups here basically says it was a difficult device. It was hard to work with. And I'm telling you, I understand that, and I agree. But there's other people that simply says it was working. And now I don't have anything. And we need something. And if we would have basically took it out as a consensus tonight that says, take this out, but please put something else in its place, then we would have won tonight. So let's try to win tonight, okay? Let's at least walk out of here with a plan that simply says either we're to reconvene or give us some ideas of what you think should be in there. And if you don't want a table or a hump, if you basically don't want something else, but you think that dynamic indicator is what we should have, then let's hear that voice. And let's see if we can make something happen, okay? Now, okay, hold on to thoughts. This young lady wants to make a comment, please.
Yeah.
Name and address.
Marilyn Savage, 1671 South, 2200 West. So my question is, where did the funds come from to remove that calming device?
Okay.
Because if we've got that much slush fund in the budget, that's wrong.
I understand. And I will indicate to you is it came out of the general funds, and we simply paid our employees to do that. It cost about $5,000 to put it in. It probably took us about 4 hours with about 3 or 4 people when I arrived to the scene as it was being dismantled, and we paid those people to remove it. The only thing we got out of that decision is we got literally a light. The light pole, Ross, is still recoverable, but everything else was a loss. I think that light cost us about $2,000. Yeah, $2,500. So literally, in all fairness to the conversation, because we don't have an alternative, we just threw away $2,500, okay, of what we should have. I would have liked to invested that $2,500 into what's next.
Okay.
And if you can walk out here and give us what next, we've done a good investment, okay?
And my question is too, do you have 3 people that need a vote for that?
I don't like the 3-person rule, okay?
One person can't make that decision alone.
One person cannot make that decision, okay? Let me make it clear in terms of understanding the city council, so there's no confusion here, okay? The rule of engagement is simply this. The council's power and authority is in the quorum. It is the quorum that makes the decisions. When a council member walks out that door today, they are have any more authority to make any decision in this city than any one of the good residents of the city. They have no authority. It is the quorum that has the authority. And it's that vote in the quorum that makes the policies and decides the future of the city.
So there was a vote.
And it's typically done by vote. But a single council member has no authority to direct, to simply says, we're going to remove this or change that. It does not have the authority. Are we okay with that? It is the
Yes.
quorum.
Yes.
Let me make
But
that
was
clear.
there a quorum in that decision?
Well, there was a quorum in the conversation only because the city manager basically says, before I make a decision to basically remove that, I want the quorum input. This is such a sensitive, difficult conversation, and it was difficult. We've seen lots of emotion here. In all fairness to the city manager, I'm glad he at least reached out and contacted almost all the council members to get a decision. Some were traveling to Arizona. One was actually at work, was never contacted. The city mayor basically was in a conference, didn't get the message until after. There was an attempt to contact me, but the fact of the matter is that in your comment, when you get the 3 votes, you press forward. That's not how this should have worked. It should have happened here, in a quorum, when the body can talk about it, listen to the input, and simply says, in the best interest to the people, let's remove it, right? And let's replace it, right? Because I'm telling you, we're doing a disservice to this community if in fact we simply tore it out and we don't do something to protect our people.
So we really
needed
lost
that.
about $7,500.
We lost whatever the investment in terms of labor hours that Matt will have to pay out of the general fund to do that, yes.
So that.
We recouped $2,500 from the light pole.
But we covered 25. If we can find a use for it, then we can benefit from it. If we can't, then it's a waste of money.
And was any of this recorded?
There's no recorded vote, there's nothing documented, hence the reason why that recorder's on here today, is because all of this is recorded and is documented. This is where it needs to happen. Your input is important, your discussion is important, and the decisions are important, but they're only important as long as that recorder basically tracks that. So if you ever come back to me and say, 2 years ago you said something, I can go back to that recorder and simply says, you're absolutely correct. I can tell you right now, there is no recording of the decision on Friday to remove that circle.
So is that illegal?
The legality of this is this, and we have the attorney here if he wants to talk legality. The decision, and I'll let him speak, Andy speak to that, but the decision was an administrative decision. But the administrative decision, which is within the realm of the city manager felt, okay, that decision warranted council input in large part because it's so controversial, okay? So I appreciate your questions, but just please understand, I don't like the way how it got removed, and honestly, I don't like the way how it got installed. We have got to be more transparent, and we're going to be more transparent when we do these kinds of things. But I offer you this, and please listen to what I'm asking you. Join us. There's nothing threatening here. You ask a hard question, we'll give you a good answer. But join us. Every council meeting offers an opportunity to understand and hear your voice. It makes it hard for us to make good decisions unless you're giving us the input. But I will tell you this, as a reference to the circle itself, I have enough documentation, trust me, enough documentation that it had to go. Because it was, in fact, painful. It was, in fact, toxic. And it divided our community like you cannot even imagine. So now we listened. We're listening. Give me a solution. Help us to figure out how we go from here. Comment.
Okay. Danette McGilvery, 3536 West, 6050 South. So a couple of comments. One on the calming device for 5700. If you told us, I don't remember what was originally recommended as the calming device. As I understood the conversation, the calming circle went in because it was the cheapest. Okay? So cheap became the criteria. We're looking for other criteria.
Yes.
Can somebody tell me what the original recommended device was?
Here's what the recommendation came out of the council meeting, and I put a chart up there.
I mean, other than the four stop signs.
The only thing that came out shortly after that is when the transportation plan was discussed in this meeting. And if you go to the public record says this, and I pulled it out, I read it, what I quoted to you is exactly what it says. The recommendation was a dynamic speed feedback radar sign system. That was the first recommendation, and the comments said in that discussion, that would be a great start as we start introducing these calming devices. But in second part to that, it says, however, there are other alternatives, other options, and it talked about most of those options in the back. That's what the record said, and that took place in December.
Okay, so my comment then is, I would recommend I go with whichever one of you said. I think it's best to start with the least intrusive. I know somebody said the calming circle was not intrusive, so I'm probably using the wrong technical term for that. But I would recommend going with the original recommendation of the people, the experts, and it's less intrusive than what that calming circle was. And I think that the cost of it should not be the driving criteria. Okay? I can't say that any more clearly. Okay? So if you want feedback, that's my feedback on it. The second thing is, I couldn't tell from the map, sorry, my eyes weren't good enough, where on 6,000 was one of these calming devices.
3750, so you have one at each end of 3750.
No.
Yes.
On 6,000.
On
6,000.
6,000. Where on 6,000?
27
Let me ask you a question. 3750, it comes all the way to 6,000. Okay? Right there at that T, there's a calming device recommended at that location. So to your question's right, and if you go up from 6,000 to 2,700, there's a calming device recommended at that location.
There's also going to be a roundabout at 3,100.
And then there's a roundabout scheduled for 3,100.
Okay, so 3 devices, really,
On
3
6,000.
things going on in 6,000. So what is the price? Oh, there we go.
I zoomed in there, these are traffic, the calming locations. The 31 is not on there because, again, that's proposed as a roundabout, which is a intersection control, not a traffic.
Not a traffic calming. Just to make sure. So do you see them? You see where they are?
Yeah.
Okay.
So is there a scheduled dates or priority order of these other devices?
We're expecting to have Matt come into us in a budget process because these can be a little expensive, and he'll help us once the council makes a decision. If we're going to modify the existing transportation plan, then Matt will make those modifications and get approval. If it's not modified because there's enough flexibility in the plan as written, then what Matt will do is he'll put a plan together based on budget funding to start the implementation. In all fairness, I see 5 years minimum before we get all these in. It's only because it's not that it's not priority, but we've got to look at all the other things that's got to be spent in the general fund or has to be spent by the Class C funds. And we'll try to manage those in there. But it's going to take some time through the budget process to be able to identify and get them in.
So what I'm still not clear, a lot of people have given comments tonight.
Yes.
I don't get the process of how you're going to take those and turn it into action. I understand that we didn't take the time to go through the flow chart of the process. I understand that. But what I don't want to have happen is a lot of people have turned out. People have given their thoughts. I still don't think that it's reasonable for you to expect people who have had, 2 minutes to look at some posters, to give you some input into what a good solution would be.
5700 was really the focus tonight. Its purpose in trying to address that would be, as we know that was an issue and we need to do something next. However,
So will it be clear then, if the focus of this is 5,700, can you promise us that when the time comes for the other devices in other neighborhoods, that we will be notified and can show up and talk about it?
and that's important to understand, but please don't misunderstand what I heard here. There's some evidence that suggests 4400 has some other problems. If you look at the dynamics, and Dr. Perrin talked about the 85% rule. 5700 surely has its problem, but it's not the most challenging problem within the city. If you start looking at other locations with the city, the numbers are even worse in those locations. To me, I would probably start to the worst situation that we have and start backing down to the least worst situation until we
Well,
get
that was
involved.
my question about schedule and priority, and I didn't hear that answer.
It's not in there,
Then I
and
didn't.
we have to look at our budgeting process on that, but
Okay,
we'll
so,
do that.
okay, so is the budgeting process, I still can't tell, I'm sorry, I need clarity on this.
That's all.
Is the budgeting process, you tell us what the device you want, and depending on how much it costs, then we'll decide? Or is it, let's look at safety, let's look at the order of the problem, and then we decide what we need, and then we decide from there?
It's the latter, because safety is critical to us. We started down this path because of safety. So to me, 5700 had to be fixed. We have a community that basically is at odds with each other. We have some conflicts within the community.
Yeah, so we get
So we got
5,700,
57.
so what,
Now let's go to the other areas that we already got the documentation to support, and let's now break those down and say, we see these to be the high critical areas because that's where the documentation suggests is the problem areas, and we start focusing on those. And to your point, we priced out a lot of the cost for these, so we pretty well know what it's costing us. Stop signs would be cheap. Dynamic speed devices are a little more expensive. You want to put a table intersection, they're very expensive. So we'll look at those, find out what's right, listen to what the input of the community is, and then we'll move forward towards that.
okay, so I'm hearing, I'm sorry, but I am a, let's get it done, and I
Yes.
have to understand the process.
Yes.
I'm hearing a lot of, and we're gonna get input from the community. You're
Yes.
getting input from the community. Do you have enough to make a recommendation to make a decision about 5,700?
No, because you
Okay,
put a
what-
proposal on the table. If I'm hearing Toby behind you, he's basically saying somewhat the same thing. If this group and this group simply says, we think 5700 could take a speed dynamic device, and we believe that is a good solution, and that question's going to come up here in a moment, once we get through all the hands, and then if we simply says, to you, that is the right solution at that location, then I think that's the direction the council needs to take, to simply say to Matt, please push a speed device, a visual dynamic speed device at that location to help us fix the problem.
Are you going to be calling for a vote at the end of this discussion? Is that the process?
That was what we wanted.
Okay.
What we wanted was, we really walked into this to simply say this. The council, I can't speak for the council, but there's evidence to suggest this. The council believed that the circle needed to go. We were going to simply say, great, your voices were heard. But for those who basically found value in it and find safety in it, then what? And by saying is, city will knock that thing out tomorrow morning. Then tell us what the what is. My fear right now is that everybody that complained to me, and I had lots of complaints, and trust me, they're not all here. Are they going to be as satisfied with basically a decision from this body that says, put the traffic device we select in here? Are they going to be as satisfied about that? I would have liked to have, in all fairness, the people who says, I have a problem with it, and all the people that simply says it worked. And let's collectively come up with a solution. That was what we hoped for tonight. Now what we've got is, we got a missing circle. We got people who basically says, it worked. We have documentation that says it worked. And now what we've got would be is, we're ready to take it out. But what's the next option? And if you just simply says, I think that traffic device works, there's evidence that suggests it's workable if we work it the way it's designed, it surely is the less intrusive okay, in terms of that, it could be very effective, then I simply says, I would say to Matt, with the council input, let's make that happen. Tomorrow morning, the council could have said, remove the circle, because this body said,
We've heard that. Where are we going forward? What's
right
the
here,
step?
I need an answer before you walk out that suggests is, on 5700, what do you want?
Who are you
We've given
asking,
you some
council?
options.
Are you asking us? I
Well,
mean,
who else is in the room?
okay, so just a second.
People that vote
This-
for us, people that live there.
This is a point of procedure.
understand. I can only say
This
this.
is a point of procedure and facilitation, because I am at a loss of how to get to where you are talking about.
Here's my
Okay.
argument. My argument was this, and all I can say is this. We purposely set this meeting up tonight, invited everybody in the community to be here. For those who chose not to be here, I can only say, where was your voice on May 1st at 6 o'clock when we needed it? And since you represent the people who's going to make that voice, I'm asking you, those who are present, I can't publicize this, I don't have the time, nor does the city have the time, to put out a flyer to everybody and say, vote on this. I think you represent the people that's interested. If you come out here and simply say, the majority is say, I think this type of device is the right one, then we move on it. And anybody who walks in and simply says, I don't like it, then I'll say, thank you, but where was your voice on May 1st at 6 o'clock when we invited you to participate?
So, what I'm not hearing is there a specific proposal or two proposals? Like, what are the options right now that we have narrowed down in the discussions? Are we that far along?
I think we are, but you've only provided one. Now I'm asking, okay, because we listened to all your inputs, we got all your input, we appreciate that. Now let's get down to what we came here for. What do you want to do? And if your answer is, let's throw some other options up there, let's have some options. If you want to talk about the technicality of it, if you want to talk about what's functionally, we got the experts here. But if you go up there and walk out of this, we want you to walk in and simply says, I think at 5700, this is the best option, and we can take, it's never going to be right for everybody, but it'll be right for most of you. Then I'll simply says, we take your advice and we move on. But let me make this clear, Tyne, I'm going to put you on the spot. What Tyne just said a few minutes ago to everybody listening to him, we're basically putting at risk our children and our families who choose to walk on 5700. This city made a commitment to you that simply says we're not going to ignore this. It's been going on for years. This council basically said we're going to do something, and we did it. And the city stepped out and simply says we're going to take this action on. It may have been the wrong option, and we didn't hear your voice when the option went out, but we did something. For the first time since I've lived in this city, on this issue, something happened. Now, was it the right choice? No. Was there a better choice? Yes. But if there's a better choice, then give us the better choices. But please do not delay this conversation, because the longer you delay this conversation and we do nothing, now that there's nothing there, and I think the doctor's point was spot on, we're now seeing increasing of speeding based on the documentation. The city has an obligation to you that live in that community to do something. Tell us what you want us to do. That's what we need to hear from you, and that's the direction. Back there.
I think that is the best solution because people are going to slow down.
Please.
Speed humps.
Speed humps. Okay, speed humps.
I'm for the dynamic sign.
Dynamic sign.
And also for the dynamic sign.
Dynamic sign.
I'm not convinced the circle was a bad thing.
I'm not saying it's bad.
But I do think it was really educated. When I first saw it, I thought, that's the smallest roundabout I've ever seen. What do I do with it? I treated it like a roundabout and went around because I wanted to turn left. So I went around it.
But Rich, let me
It's
help.
off the table.
First thing is that not every decision is always the right decision. Here's
No,
the
but I haven't
dynamics of
seen
this
the proof
conversation.
that this was a bad decision.
I'm not saying it was bad. The experts say it was the right decision. It's cost effective, less intrusive. But here's the point I want to say. When I read the Federal Highway Administration's rules to engagement, and it talked about this, it made it absolutely clear over and over again as I went through the studies. You've got to engage the public. Rich, nobody asked the public. Nobody asked you to sit down.
You are now, and I'm suggesting, put the circle back.
Thanks for your comments. That's no longer the vocabulary.
Why?
Please.
Jamie Larson, 557 South, 3750 West. And just to address a couple of you, I think the trailers made the big issue with the problem with the intersection. That was not the big issue for the most of us that had to do the left-hand turn. I think that it was people like me, for those of you here that were actually at the last city council meeting when we discussed this, when this meeting got set up, where I'm walking across the street with my 2 children under 2, and I'm all of a sudden having a lot bigger issue because there's this now U obstruction in the middle of the road and they couldn't see us. And so I would like the dynamic sign, but then maybe looking at something like Joe had suggested that looks more at the pedestrian traffic issue of it rather than just the speeding issue.
Thank you for your comment. Comment back here. Thank you. Name and address.
My name's Jason Hayes, 3827 West, 5625 South.
Thank you.
My vote is for the dynamic signs.
Okay.
As a normal person, a little reminder helps.
Okay.
I've seen them.
Okay. Comment?
Bob, they've had those signs periodically for, I don't know, maybe a week or two. I don't know how long they set them out there. They do nothing. People get used to them, and it doesn't matter. It's not like it's a policeman sitting there. I know about the policemen, and they don't have time to sit on 57. But I'm just saying, I don't think that's, something's got to slow the cars down.
Okay.
And that blinking thing,
Is not going to do that.
oh, it might the first time they see it, because they might think of officers in the next cul-de-sac taking radar, but after so many days or weeks.
What do you think it should be?
Okay. Hold that thought. Hold that thought. Comment?
Robin Arnold, 5898 South, 3650 West.
Please.
Law enforcement.
I was raised when I did that. Can I speak to that?
Yes.
Let me speak to one thing about law enforcement. Law enforcement wages, we're grateful for them, come directly out of city budget. We do not have enough money to keep law enforcement on every one of these streets. We have a shortage of police officers. Traffic calming devices comes out of Class C road funds, which is provided from the state to help us. So we can't take Class C road funds and put it in the police department to monitor traffic. We have to have something that works 24/7. Our police officers love them to death. They can't stay on these roads 24/7. So we've got to be able to have something else that forces people to slow down, that forces people to watch for pedestrians.
We have, let me finish here, we have a law, a speed limit. It's a law. It needs to be enforced. You collect a few funds on citations, that builds your money.
Yes.
Okay? That's where you get your revenue from.
But if you can prevent
Yes,
it
I
from
agree with
happening
you.
in the first
Let me
place.
clarify your point.
All right, just a second here, let me finish. You get your revenue from your citations. We need to stop the violations of the law. We have laws in place. We don't need comedy circles. We don't need devices like that. We've got laws to protect us. Let's enforce them.
I'd like maybe the police chief to stand up and speak to that because he's ultimately responsible for that.
We make about 500 traffic stops a month in the city. Well, that's all around the city. And the problem we have with traffic is we've got 4 main arteries going east and west. So everybody cuts through all around trying to, most of the time we drive the speed limit. But when that day comes when you're in a hurry, everybody's cutting through the neighborhoods going way too fast. So we can't enforce it every place. Since that circle went in, the 2 complaints I've had is you were never around before, now you're around. If we're writing tickets, you don't like us. If we don't write tickets, you don't like us. We don't solve the problem. The fact is, in an area like this, I hear people saying they want the dynamic speed feedback sign. Your engineer told you that works for 2 weeks. For that road, you have to have them every half mile, so you're going to spend $15,000 to put you adequate speed signs on that road, and they're going to work for 2 weeks. That's not the answer. If you want something else, you need to listen to the experts.
Yep. Let me just make a point, and I appreciate the comments. To make a left-hand turn at that circle cost the people, and there was 4 of them, I'm aware, $120. You double that to $240 to make that left-hand turn in front of that circle, I think you do get their attention. But I will tell you, as mayor, I will tell you, a whole lot of people that got that $120 bill called me, and they were really upset because they didn't think they had to pay $120 to make that turn.
Did they violate the law?
They violated the law
Then
because,
they're-
agreed.
We need to
One
tell
thing
them
you
there's
can
a law.
do is you simply, your point was well taken. You raise the penalty, you take it out of their back pocket, they get their attention. Sorry, Chief.
Mayor, the one problem with that concept is, it's the idea that we get that $120. By the time it goes to the state and everybody else, all of our citations give us about $30,000 a year in the city. So they don't.
That doesn't
they
even
won't
pay for one officer.
Pay
Yeah.
for one more police officer.
And that's true, because the way the money's distributed. But to your point, we can do that. And by the way, the council can make that happen. And if it looks like it might be a couple of options that we want to look at to help get this thing to control, I'm all for that. I think a suggestion, maybe the speed device, maybe as we're hearing, and I appreciate Dr. Perrin making this comment, he said, and I'll offer this as a thought, because I think it's worthy of this conversation. We can buy temporary units. We can go out there and buy a speed hump, temporary one, and mount it. And let's see if it works. And if it works and you like it, then we can make it more permanent. If it doesn't work and it looks like it's creating more of a problem, take it out. But the key would be is if we can collectively decide that works in our best interest, because your point's well taken, Ty. The fact of the matter is, a passive device like for a better word, that dynamic speed is passive. You hit a speed hump at 35 miles an hour, it's going to create some interesting damage. The key would be is that maybe we do a couple of options on 5700 to find a solution that works for all of us. I'm open to suggestions, but I don't want to do this in a vacuum, okay? Your input's critical, but here's what I heard. A lot of people are saying is, I like the dynamic speed, so why not? And if the other part of that conversation is, maybe we can put a temporary unit at that location to see if that helps make it down and we've worked it, why not? We can do some why nots and figure out if there's a solution that works for us, but you got to talk to us. Comment back there,
I have a suggestion.
please. Your name and address,
Rena
please.
Oliver, 5945 South, 3750 West. I think to accommodate all these issues, rather it be trailers, children, we don't even have sidewalks, so I'm concerned about children. My kids have to ride like their bikes on the street, along with some other people.
Yes.
So I think that the raised intersection and a couple speed bumps would solve everybody's issues.
Good.
And I don't know if there's anybody in this room that could disagree with that.
That's correct. They will solve the problem, but let me just make a point, and I appreciate your comment. If all the people that complained to me had a problem with the circle, and we put, and I don't know what the cost of that raised platform would be at an intersection, but it is not cheap. It's not something we can pull and replace. It goes in, it stays in. I just have a concern that if they didn't like the circle, are they going to like that table? And I don't know that answer. But I'm here to say to you is that if we as a body believe that we can mix some options, then we'll mix some options to see if this will work. I like the doctor's position. Let's do something temporary, so if it doesn't look like it's going to work for us, take it out without a big expense. But we need to do something on 5700. So I heard a group simply says the dynamic speed. I'm also hearing you're saying is hump would work. You have to put a couple of those in play. Other ideas before we simply float this down? Toby?
I would rather see a rear-end accident any day than a child getting hit.
Yes.
No kidding.
Yes.
Stop signs.
Yeah.
Yes, stop signs.
So you're saying stop signs?
Stop signs.
Stop signs.
Stop signs.
You can pull them out, it takes a worker 20 minutes. Put one in, 20 minutes, pull it out.
Okay.
It's the cheapest option, try it.
So don't go with the speed dynamic. You're saying just go to stop signs, call it a day.
Maybe both of them. Both of them.
There's a stop sign and the temporary
Not the temporary
Well,
sign.
Okay, we really wanted this debate, and we've got a lot of input, but let's walk through this, because If we put too much on that street, and all they're doing is running between that, we got a major problem. So if what I'm hearing you say to us is, not the circle, but something else, then maybe the argument's going to be is, put your name, your address, your email address, and we'll try to work something else out and send it to you and let you know we're going to do something. Because we got a whole lot of people in here, and I'll bring it to you, all of us have different opinions, and we're not going to get anything done. Comments?
What about speed, stop signs, and pedestrian safety?
Speed, what do you mean?
So I mean stop signs and pedestrian safety. So if we're worried about people getting rear-ended, are we also worried about people not paying attention to stop signs and running people over that's walking through a crosswalk?
There's nothing there now.
That's why there's
There's
typically
no line
warrants for
telling you
those
where to
things.
stop.
I mean, there's actually, that's why there's stop sign warrants, because when you don't put a stop sign, or you put a stop sign where it's not warranted, there's that false sense by the pedestrians of the safety that, and you tend to have other violations, but. I mean,
Okay, so let's try this. Let's try this, because I think it's coming that this may be the right solution so we can get a real good solution out of here. I heard a lot of conversation that simply says, at the 57 and 37 intersection, 3750 intersection, the discussion was, let's put a dynamic radar speed device at that location. Would, by raise a hand, give us an idea of the feel for this. I need to know how many people here would support a radar unit on that street.
I think you need to give us options. I mean, we've heard.
Can we vote 5
We
times?
cannot, I'm not gonna vote
I'm
unless
gonna go
I
to the
know what
next
all
one.
the options are.
The next one's coming.
I've written down 3 options.
Do we
that
only
I've
get one
heard.
vote?
I need to know what you think the
We're going to cover all 3
options
options.
are.
We're going to cover 3
Along
options.
with the speed signs, how would you implement a crosswalk there also? Would they both warrant that?
Yeah.
How would, I'm sorry.
Are they both warranted to be there, in your opinion? If you get a crosswalk and the speed signs?
The speed signs you can add anywhere, because again, the speed signs are relying on that people are unaware and not paying attention. So it's feedback to the conscientious people. People that are like, "Nah, I just want to get from A to B and I don't care what I'm doing." The speed signs won't impact. That's where your physical impact, your physical changes such as vertical or horizontal is where it's going to impact them. So,
But the crosswalks, tell us, does that, in your opinion, that street needs crosswalks? Because I mean, it's a popular thing in the neighborhood, it's a safety thing for the children. We know that, we feel we want that, but from your expert opinion, I'd like to also.
that is a long stretch of road.
crosswalks or
Just crosswalks, just paved crosswalks.
That's what
It's about connectivity, because that's a long stretch of road.
Right,
with-
wide.
Yeah, and it's a wide road, so if it was about crossing and pedestrian, then you would have crosswalks located approximately on the quarter-mile interval at most, type of thing, and it could be shorter than that, but technically, the vehicle code says you can cross it at any intersection, right? It's jaywalking mid-block unless you put a crosswalk in. At any intersection, you can cross. So you're really adding paint to the road for formalizing the crosswalk, but drivers typically always know that there's the potential for, that's where they look for subconsciously, that's where they look for pedestrians is at corners, because that's where they normally cross. So you can formalize those crosswalks if you'd like. Normally, what you'd be saying is, what is my progression of increasing? So I have the residential area, and I'm going to put crosswalks on it. As soon as you start putting crosswalks on this road, I really think we need to think that this is considered more of a collector street than a residential street. Because you're not in the middle of the neighborhood where you put, okay, where do we stop? Do we put crosswalks on every single corner everywhere? And so as the collector street, then you start saying, let's formalize those crossing locations.
But I think
Okay, so here's, I appreciate that you got that input. Let's look at the 3 options that we're talking about.
that's where I think.
Would you support a dynamic radar sign on 57? If you do, raise your hand.
What
Okay.
are the 3 options?
Can we vote 3 times?
Tell us all 3
You gotta
options
tell us
first.
Do they have to pick
Second, do they have to pick one?
option? Do you want stop signs at the 4-way?
With lights.
So we got 3.
Yeah,
Lights them up.
We're not I'm not voting until I hear the options. Are you?
The other option would be is we put a more intrusive device like a hump or a table at that location, preferably temporary, just to try it to make sure. I think those are the 3 options we're talking about.
To me, it's an important distinction on the humps that we say whether people are voting for permanent or temporary. I
Oh,
could
to me-
vote for something temporary where I might not vote for something permanent.
Okay, to me, if you're going to do it, I'm saying temporary, but I do know that people's opinions shift when they basically drive over it. We surely have seen that. So to your question then is that temporary may give us a try that simply says we can do it. By the way, if we choose to use it there, we can make it permanent. We can also take the temporary and try it somewhere else in the city to try it there to see if it works. I like the temporary idea because we have some flexibility. But I've got to walk out of here and you expect this. This simply says we need a solution. Otherwise, this has been a great conversation. Thank you for your input, and then we'll make a decision for you. Comment.
Yeah, I got a question on that speed hump.
Yes.
Can you take it at 25, or are you going to have to slow down there too?
That's a good question. Does a speed hump take it 25, or are you going to slow for a speed hump?
No, they're designed for 25, so they're
Is it a
They're designed-
gradual hump, or is it one of those real?
It depends, if it's a hump, it's typically 20 feet wide that goes over, no, it's not a parking lot speed bump. You don't do those because those are the ones snowplows hate. So typically the designs, and they're approved by federal highways. In fact, if you don't do a design that meets those standards, UDOT has a standard, things like that, you actually can get in trouble and be liable. So there are designs, so if it's just a speed hump, no flat part on top, it's about 20 feet wide, it comes up, just kind of is parabolic. If it's a speed table, it's 30 feet wide, 10-foot rise to the speed table, which is 10 foot wide.
10 foot, 10 inch.
10 foot wide.
Oh, wide.
Yeah, no, not 10 foot high.
Yeah.
I would say wall. Yeah, I was gonna say. No, I'm sorry, if I said that, I apologize. No, it's 30 feet wide, so the car's going this way, right? And so it's the rise 10 feet to get up to the table. The table is usually flush mounted with the curb on either side, so that's, 6-inch rise.
Yeah, about 6.
And then you have the 10-foot down, and the table is 10 feet because that's what we use for crosswalks, is about a 10-foot crosswalk. So that's why you get the 30 feet, 10, 10, 10.
But you can't really put that next to a four-way stop because that puts the downhill, or a four-way intersection, that puts the downhill in the middle of an intersection.
Yes, I have seen it, but normally what we try to do, and this is where we haven't really even talked choker. That's why I think you want to try to start with something that's not permanent, because we put something permanent in, we had to rip it out. And the whole point is what we're trying to do is come up with our process, but we're also on 57 coming up with emergency response because the circle's been taken out. So we're kind of doing parallel things, because normally this is where you would go through and say, well, what do the residents want? Let's try a temporary one, let's move on, because if we don't like intersection things, then what we do is we say, okay, let's not do intersection, let's do mid-blocks. And that's where the speed tables for crosswalks at mid-block, or you get into the choker islands and chicanes, which are more of a mid-block treatment, because the whole idea is we're trying to calm that whole section. So we don't have to do it at the intersections. We can do it mid-block. It's just the appropriate spacing of things and the different ideas. So your question is normally speed tables, because we normally would put speed tables and humps at mid-block or spaced, not at the intersection. At the intersection, we have more of our traditional crosswalks, and they're controlled because we don't
So
like
an
to have
intersection would be
something.
more of a raised intersection, where you raise the whole thing, encompass crosswalks and all that with it.
You would do everything, and then the intersection functions as your speed calming device, because you've done the whole intersection is raised. No matter which approach you come from, you're still having to go up, cross the intersection, then you come down. Again, where's that really effective? It's effective for the direction that doesn't have a stop sign. The stop direction, this intersection doesn't really do anything.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so here we go. We're going to get to this, okay? And I've got plenty of time, so let's make sure we get through this. What do you want? Do you want stop signs? Let's go back to the original, okay? Just four-way stop signs, call it a day.
My concern with the four-way stop sign is the children having a false security in crossing. I would say a stop sign, a four-way stop with the lines, and a hump just before the church if you're going east, or a street before, so it slows them down, getting them prepared for the stop, so that they don't just blow through it. That would be my thing.
Okay.
I also heard
Please.
we're having a lot of diversion from the other streets because the other streets are so busy.
Well, they
My
will, yes,
concern,
correct.
or my, I guess, question, are we thinking other areas, West Haven, 4,000 South, and Hinkley Drive, SR 193, they have avenues to move traffic. And I know that's not our issue right here, but it kind of is, because if we're having traffic divert through the neighborhoods, do we have a plan to move people, to move traffic.
To your, okay, sidebar conversation, transportation talks to this. The only solution Royce City has, in my opinion, and I'm not the expert, that you are, is we've got to widen 3,500.
Yes.
And we've got to widen 5,600.
Yes.
If we do not make those 5-lane streets, we will not be able to deal with the growth patterns going in Hooper and West Haven that's going to come at us like a freight train. The challenge we have right now is 3,500 is planned to be widened. It's coming from the south, moving up on 2,000. Right now, I think it's sitting right there by the new Smiths. It'll probably hit right around 1,800, and then there's a debate what will happen from 1,800 coming into Weaver County. But it's planned to happen. I'm estimating 2023. 5,600 has a study going as we speak. The study will be completed, we heard, at the end of this year. If the UDOT study says the solution to that, to mitigate the impact, is to widen that to 5 lanes, all indications says it will. The proposal, not only study looks at 5,600 widening, but it also takes the entire intersection or interchange at I-15 and changes that as well. The total cost is $150 million to be able to make that 2.5-mile change, acquiring property, widening, putting a bridge in over the tracks, and then whatever the cost is going to be for the interchange. That's not scheduled right now until 2032. I think that's the latest. But once the study's done, we can push it through the Wasatch Regional Council. We can start pushing it through legislators. We can go to the Transportation Commission, and we can start lobbying to simply try to move that schedule up. But
How
that
far
has
west
to,
does that go?
it will actually go down 5,500, ultimately all the way into Hooper. But the first step is going to take it from 3,500 up to the interchange. So here's the challenge to your question. We have got to get that problem solved. I've got enough complaints coming on 3,100 at 56. That intersection is dangerous. UDOT has recognized the danger and is proposing, I assume, in this study to put a traffic light at that location. Your plan talks about that, 5,631.
Yes.
That's going to be a great help at that location. We have a real concern about children getting to the elementary school. The proposal that UDOT is proposing is to actually channel under the road where the trail is, so that the children can go under that road, okay, to cross over. They will still keep the hawk device that's sitting there. It'll obviously be widened out, but we believe that the safest position is to get them out of the traffic way, 5 lanes, and stick them under the road to make the crossover. So those are the things we're focusing on. Those are the things we hope the study will point out, and then once it's pointed out, we can move with it. Right now, we can't do much.
Water table will allow them to go under?
Well, that's the piece that UDOT has to work. They believe it's not a problem, but they're the experts. They're going to have to make that work. I see it in other locations. Antelope Drive has one on the trail. We see them under theirs. We think that's the solution to keep our children in harm's way on that main intersection. Personally, I've talked to the principal. I think they need to reconfigure the entrance to the elementary school. I won't get into that option. The school has to work that, but it's going to be a very, very, very busy byway when you put 5 lanes and you're moving all that traffic up and down 5,600. So, but to the question, and this is important, we come in here with 5,700 on our mind. We made a bold statement. It is now removed. I need a solution. I got about 5 of you said, let's go with stop signs. Okay? I'm going to ask you one more time. And I also heard the comment that says maybe supplement that with a temporary device to see if that helps with some type of a speed hump, not a bump, but a hump, that allows us some flexibility.
Not right there.
In that close proximity, because as the doctor suggested, you have to put a series of these in to make them effective. We can surely look at that. The other option would be is that we simply put in some dynamic tracking device, radar device, that basically allows you to get visibility. There's lots of variations of that. You can have some that basically said don't even come on unless you break the speed limit. Some of them have flashing lights. Interesting enough, if you looked at the signs of that, some of them go up there and say, slow down. It's actually a digital sign that comes up and tells you you're going too fast, stupid. So we can do some really interesting things. Some devices, you can actually put monitoring devices to track speed, and then maybe once a month you plug a computer into it, and you literally find out how fast people really are going. We can't necessarily take a picture of them, but we'll definitely be able to know whether it's working or not, because it will show us exactly how many hit the radar over the speed limit. So there's some interesting dynamics to this. What I need from you is, what do you want to do so that the council can make a decision? Do I change the transportation plan and not do anything at that location? Or do you want to do something where we basically need to do something at that location? I'm hearing you like the stop signs, maybe a speed bump to go with it. Does anybody want to have the speed dynamic sign put at those locations? I see 1, I see 2, I see 3, 4, 5, 6, and I see 7 and 8.
Along with the stop sign.
No. Well, okay. Go ahead.
So keep asking for hands.
You put the sign, if you do the all-way stop, the sign's worthless. You gotta, at the intersection, you have to put it maybe down a quarter mile. Okay, I thought you were saying put both of them at the intersection. I was just saying they don't kind of go together.
So we satisfy basically the need, if we put 4-way signs at that location, to put the speed dynamics in there and look at the possibility of putting humps. Is that what I heard?
Okay.
Okay, comment.
Yeah, if you start mixing things, you're never gonna know what is working.
I know.
I think you gotta try one thing, try it for a little while. If it's working, but not good enough, you can supplement, or you can change. But I think if we do everything, we'll slow stuff down, we'll choke it up. But we won't know what we did.
Yeah, Dr. Perrin said it right. What happens is, and I read the research on it, if the people find it's too cumbersome to go down 5700, they'll go down a different street. They just convert to another street. And that puts more people probably on 6000 cutting. I'm going to be blunt with you, and I'm not the expert here, but the biggest problem with 5700 is really the location of how they basically made access and entrance into that whole subdivision. You're coming off 3500, or you got to go all the way, almost all the way down to the park to be able to go out on the north. There's a couple of roads you can get out on the south to 6000, but there's no exit, effective exit going out on the north. That should never have been designed that way. It is what it is. Okay, so here's what I'm going to take away unless you tell me otherwise. Let's push with an idea about putting 4 stop signs at that location and put a speed dynamic unit. And then as you're suggesting, if that isn't working the way it's designed to work, let's go with a more intrusive type of device like a speed hump, and we mount in there temporarily to see if we get people's attention. Okay?
Just be on record, I don't want 4-way.
Okay.
This doesn't go through here. This is a dead end.
It is.
So your map sucks. This doesn't go through. It's a dead end. So your map sucks. The map that went with this one, there's another one that has parentheses 33, 35. Can you? Is it easy to click over to that one?
That's on my computer.
Okay, that one shows this is a 35 mile an hour. It's a 25.
Now,
It's a 25 mile an hour
I think you're
zone.
mixing up what the measured speed was versus what the posted
No,
speed
it
was.
says 33 in parentheses, it says 35. And so your map sucks.
Well, let me show you what the information shows. I promise you we're going to get this done tonight. And thanks for your comment. Let me just pull this one up because I put some interesting ones at the end of this because I thought this might come up.
There's other problems with that I'd like to show.
Okay, so here is...
No, you got one that's got the speeds on it, that's 85%.
That's the one right there. That's got the posted speed limit,
85.
and then it has the 85% track.
In the city's website.
Let's do a temporary sign up. For a while. March release. That's what I mean.
So speed enforcement is off the table then?
No. The conversations that come up would be is that speed enforcement is critical. But let me just share a thought. And Chief,
I understand
you're
what
the
you said.
expert. If the answer to the question is you need to hire 5 or 6 more beyond what the normal standard is, there's a cost to that.
I know.
And all you have to do is just reprioritize what you want done.
Do we
And
need
then
more
have to decide.
policemen?
But enforcement is by far the easiest. I will tell you right now, and you need to hear me say this because it's absolutely true. When you put a police officer on 5700 and the police officers were on 5700, traffic slowed down. And the argument I got from the people that simply says, do not measure the speed on 5700 when you got a police officer sitting on the corner, because you're not going to get a real reading, and it's absolutely true. And I will tell you, 5700 has been a target now for the last few months where the chief has directed officers on that street on a regular basis, and it's a great place to collect revenue. Not a lot of revenue, but it's great because they just break the law over and over again. I thought 6,000 was a big one because they've had police officers sitting in people's driveway and they're writing tickets left and right. 5,700 got his fair share. And as I mentioned to you, $120 because you make the wrong left-hand turn in front of that circle is $120 that people are saying is, why did that happen?
I'm
If you got to make it 200,
talking about the speed,
this was,
breaking the speed, not making the turn.
I'm just telling you,
If they
they're
can
patrolling
sit
it,
there for the illegal turn, they can sit there for the speed.
and they did. They wrote ticket after ticket. But the chief said he basically got 500 tickets in the city in a month. They're writing tickets.
Good.
They're either,
We live on
either they're
we live
not,
on-
either the people have a lot of money to give away, or the fine isn't high enough.
Hence becomes the conversation. So what you do is you simply say, council, do you want to raise that to $250? If you raise it high enough, I guarantee you people will not have a problem in terms of speeding. They may not want to live around there or drive through the
That's
neighborhoods,
what I'm
but you don't
saying.
have any problems.
Right.
Understand? But there has to be a balance, okay?
Mayor, let's clarify where we left off, where we're at. So we're good with stop signs?
Stop signs and
Dynamic
dynamic
signs,
signs.
one heading east and one heading west.
One on both ends, that's what I heard, right?
Ross says the signs will take about 2 weeks to ship and get in. Stop signs will get shipped. The other signs will take a couple weeks to get in.
That's right, that's
I
right.
would like to know why he doesn't want the stop signs. I mean, I'd like to hear all the.
Here's what he said, he got a good point. He says, if you throw all of the eggs in the basket, which is what we're kind of talking about, put a whole lot of things in there, that will definitely work. But maybe if you do one or two things up front, check it for 30 days, check it, see if it's working. If it's not, then exercise another option. You start to move towards the solution rather than throwing everything in the solution. Here's my concern, and you got to look at this practically. The fact of the matter is, you make 57 too hard to travel, people will not travel.
6,000 would be good.
And then they divert to some other place, which is fine. If you live in that neighborhood, you'll say, gee, that's okay. But it diverts the problem to somewhere else. And so we need to basically find the right solution that does not interfere with people's lives to the level that they need to interfere. If that means more patrols, we do that. If that basically means we raise the cost of a penalty, we do that. If that means we look at other options to add devices, we can do that. But we just want to take this in increments to make sure that we do it right. I think what we just heard from you was this. Put the stop signs in, put the dynamic speed signs in, start there. If we want to go beyond that, we go beyond that.
No, you asked stop signs and you got a few takers. You asked the dynamic indicators, you got more takers.
Yes.
The reason that stop sign wasn't voted on by the ones who want the dynamic, you're combining two things that I don't think you should.
What would you propose?
I would like to just see the dynamic indicators first.
Okay, so we got one vote for dynamics, but I just seen 8 votes over here that says I want stop signs. So what I'm trying to say, what I'm saying is, what the doctor said, push the dynamic signs towards the east. So they're not sitting right at the intersection. Put the stop signs at the intersection, and on the other one that's on the west side, push that dynamic sign down a little further west.
Okay,
So give them that option.
So I'm locked into that subdivision. I can't get out to the east after 2:30 in the
Correct.
afternoon unless
Correct.
I'm going right.
Correct.
So that makes me go down there, and if you're gonna make me stop every however often, I don't wanna do that. I wanna just be, I wanna be able to go, I'll go at my 25, 28, whatever.
I don't disagree
And
with you.
when I'm reminded, for me, that works. I go down that road in Clinton and, you know.
I understand, but here's the challenge we got. The city just told you, by all the evidence, we've got a serious hazard on 5700.
Yep.
We have a choice. Either we step up and figure out how to fix it, or we just simply walk away like they have for the last many years and simply says, not my problem, let the next set of city council members deal with it.
I'm not suggesting that.
Then I'm asking you to simply say-
But your expert has said we shouldn't be putting stop signs in there. You're going to set yourself up for a lawsuit when that happens.
I understand.
I think that's one that maybe you add next.
Okay.
I don't think that's your first.
I appreciate the comment, okay? That's a
What
good
about,
comment.
what about the option, I heard an earlier option that I didn't hear you asking for a vote on, which is temporary speed bumps and temporary flashing signs. And we try that combination. I heard that, but I didn't hear anybody take a vote on it.
Well, okay.
I mean, in fact, I'm still not clear on what everything it is that you're asking people to vote on.
What I'm asking
so-
them to basically say is, here's what I'm asking, because we're going to have a whole lot of opinions and we're not going to get anything done tonight. Here's what I'm asking you. There's a group in this group that says, all I want is stop signs, right? There's a group in here simply says, all I want is in fact flashing radar signs.
Just start with.
And then I hear a group that simply says, I will compromise and I will allow you to put stop signs at that location, but I want my flashing lights.
No, because I want bumps.
And now the option would be is, because we do not know if that's going to solve the problem, that we think we ought to purchase temporary bumps and also put bumps at that location to simply be
Humps,
more
not bumps,
intrusive.
humps, there's a
They're
difference.
humps, not bumps.
Humps where it slows them down.
And that will solve our problem, I promise you. And we can do that. But I need to make sure, and all this gentleman was saying is, can we do this incrementally and see what works first to get the approach we want? We can make a sizable investment on 5700, and we can make that more difficult than you can possibly imagine to get through there. And I promise you, unless you have to drive down that road, you will not drive down that road. But that's not our purpose here. Our purpose simply is to simply says, what will work to make this happen? And I'm asking you, and what I heard was, give me stop signs, give me a dynamic indicator, and if we want to put a hump, we put temporary hump out there. If that's the answer, then let's walk out of here, because
Okay, I'm not saying that. I think that it's still not clear. To me, there's an option number one, we want stop signs only. Option number two, we want dynamic signs
Yes.
only.
yes,
Option number three,
Yes.
we want a combination of stop signs and the flashing signs.
Let's go
I've
for
heard
it.
that, wait.
Okay.
That's why I can't vote, because I still can't clearly see the options. Number four, and I hope somebody's writing these down so we know what the options. These are the ones that I'm hearing, I just want to clarify.
Okay.
And then,
the bumps.
someone has said we want speed bumps. I don't want my suggestion of speed bumps to say speed bumps and stop sign and this all in one. I don't
Okay,
think that's
so
what we're
let's
asking.
make it simple for you. How many want us to just simply do nothing else but put a speed hump at that location? Raise your hand.
We're talking intersection, right?
Not at the intersection, we're not
temporary.
witnessing. What we're saying is just simply put speed humps on 5700. Take a count.
I can't move on.
Okay? Lamar said, that is by far the majority of this conversation. No stop signs, no radar signs. We'll put speed humps in that location.
I'm
I'm
gonna
going to
go
ask you
through
to
all the
basically-
other options that you threw, you gotta go back, you gotta do all four. So that was
And how many
four.
votes do we get?
Well-
We vote for all of them.
Okay, then, is there going to be a, I basically said that. So what you're saying is, let's change that up then, okay, I'll work that. How many then want then, we'll go through the four options. The first option I said is, how many want just a speed hump? How many voted? 17?
Yeah, about
Okay.
16.
Who wants just the radar unit? Just radar? Okay, one. How many just want the stop signs? 1, 2, 3, 4. Just 4. 5. I heard a little 5 there, okay? We got 5. How many want combination of speed bumps, radar unit, and stop signs? Raise them. I see 2.
Who wants their taxes to go up?
And he's already got, we
Okay.
didn't make the money taking those out. You've lost that money.
I'm sorry, say that again? Okay, so here's what I got. What we got was, it came back to simply say, let's put speed humps on 5700 at the appropriate locations, and that's all we need to do for now. Is that what I heard?
Temporarily. We'll watch it, we'll do traffic studies.
Okay, we'll put temporaries in.
And
Is that what I heard? Is that what we took? Thank you.
Or the flashing lights.
I'm sorry?
Which is more
The temporary tables or the speed humps would be our best option because we can use those at other locations in the future in the city because they'll only stay there until we determine that they are working and acceptable to the public or not. And then we'll put the permanent ones in there. And so we really need to have these devices at the Public Works facility anyway. And so if we put those in, they will actually be reused a few different times in some different places.
Okay.
What is that?
We're getting close.
Device?
Rich, what's that?
Was that an inflated?
No, it's rubber.
Oh, it's rubber, okay.
Very hard rubber, and
Okay.
they're pounded into the spikes.
So we would only use it during non-winter times because they're not snowplow friendly, these ones.
Right.
But they're basically strips that are so wide, the length of the table, you nail them down.
Gotcha.
And then you can pull them
So
up.
we could do it for 90 days, maybe
Yeah.
6 months, and if we determine that's it, then put in permanent before
Right.
the winter.
They don't go gutter to gutter, so you still have drainage.
They'll taper out, but that means, how do you,
Well,
there's a couple ways to do it, because if you're making it as a crosswalk, you're required to do ADA standards. So that's why we say that lots of times you run into drainage.
You want to push it back up
On
the
the
road where the
temporary ones, you're not creating necessarily, what we would probably do is more of a speed bump without an actual crosswalk, just to see if they're effective in reducing this.
Okay, let's finish this conversation over here because we brought that up. What's your point on this one?
That he doesn't have the map that I got off the website.
Okay.
But it shows this as a 35. Where are we?
No, shows that as 25, the 85th
No,
percentile.
the other map.
The other
on
map that is-
website
Yeah, there is
shows
another
this as a
map. I
35.
agree with him, I've seen it. There is another map that shows below 3,500 west, it's 35 miles an hour, and it's not.
And what it shows is that our bigger problem is here than here.
Yes.
The only reason we're addressing this
Transportation plan.
is because Joe Paul lives on this street.
No.
Not?
In all fairness,
We've
all
lived there
fairness
for
to-
20 years
I know,
and it's been a nightmare
but-
the whole time.
Okay,
Who's
the
in there
engineer,
before
the
Joe
engineer
Paul?
said,
Go ahead.
let's not ignore, the engineer's first recommendation to the city was to raise the speed limit.
Yeah, that'd work.
And on October 30th. And people didn't want to hear that. They don't want to hear it.
Okay. Well,
And
Go ahead.
the reason why it should be raised is because it's not, it is a collector.
well,
There's a lot of people that live in there that have to use that street.
that's correct. The argument then becomes is, and you defined it, is it a 25 mile an hour? Should it be raised to a 30 because it's a collector and we're driving all of that traffic to 5700 and they're exiting 5700? And that's a possibility that could be looked at. I guarantee
I'm not
you.
voting to raise the speed.
Well, I understand.
But that's what the engineer's original,
No, it wasn't, well, that was
it
not
it
our,
was.
that was not our
And-
recommendation.
And
It said it was an option.
Paulson and Joe were opposed to that.
Mayor's never my recommendation.
I was opposed to what? Hold on.
I do not recommend raising.
It's
Okay,
supposed to
so-
raise the
It
speed
wasn't
limit.
me.
That is not the.
So the argument, the conversation is this. The allegation suggested is that the recommendation coming to the city from the transportation plan was to raise the speed limit from 25 to 30 miles an hour on 5700. Because council members are living on that street simply did not want to do that, that's the conversation. It was never raised based on the recommendation of the engineer. That's the allegation. It may have been a discussion item, but it was not proposed that I read in the plan.
Well, Paulson's joking that he wants to raise it to 40.
Are you raising that to 40?
No. Paulson jokes with Paul that he's going to raise it to 40. And the engineer and I don't know if it's this
I think it's
doctor or not, but he says,
Paulson.
no,
Yeah,
only
he said
30.
Jason.
And then Joe makes a joke about tannerite in the road, and then Joe says that he's already got his cut, and I assume that means they've already started building the round, the.
Where is this you're quoting from?
October 30th, halfway through the audio.
We're all here to slow this road down, not you.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there's many documentations that this problem is bigger than me.
Okay,
So I don't
October
know what you're
30th.
quoting.
Okay.
No, October 30th, you can hear the engineer say that they have talked about the 85 percentile.
Yeah, that was their
And then
transportation
normally
plan
you
down
raise
here.
the road. And then Paulson jokes that, oh, we're gonna raise it to 40. And he's just, poking at Paul. And then Paul says that the traffic's so fast he's gonna put tannerite in the road. And then he jokes that, and he says, and I already got my cut. So I also don't agree with your timeline. I think the thing was being built before October 30th.
Okay, I have the documentation that proves it, but you're okay. Let me offer this thought.
Okay, I only bring this up because
proposed before
the map
August 30th.
sucks.
Here's what I would recommend, council, because this is the reality of oftentimes when we talk and maybe joking, it becomes part of the permanent record. I don't know what that conversation was, but obviously you've looked at it. I appreciate it, but here's what I'm
No, I
sensing.
listened to it. I don't know what was written down.
Well,
I only hear it.
And I appreciate that, but here's what I'm sensing. Nobody in this room is saying right now they have any interest of raising that speed limit on 57 to 30 miles an hour. Okay,
So ask.
okay. So
No,
I
I'm just saying, let's not ignore that the first recommendation is to raise the speed limits where the 85 percentile is higher than.
I think on that map you're quoting, it's actually a typo, because the 85th percentile is 33 miles an hour, which is what's in parentheses, and it's showing the speed limit is 35. I think that's because they continued the speed limit all the way down. I don't believe that was ever
Right,
recommended.
it is a typo.
That it was
But
stopped at 20.
the actual is higher than, it's higher, the problem's bigger on this road than it is on.
You're absolutely
57.
correct. We recognize.
So why did we
So
go
why are
build
we-
it there instead of where a bigger problem is?
Because the traffic studies that were taking place in September set in motion complaints from the residents that told the city over and over again, we are absolutely tired of high speeding. Two were identified, the one up there that has nothing on it, it's not being proposed, and 57. Before the transportation plan was even presented to the council for review, those two studies were already in motion because the city received a lot of complaints. I have that documentation that says that.
So 57 is our problem. But-
57.
But our map shows that 57's, I mean, there's all these homes are going down 57.
Yes.
So it's not a neighborhood street like others.
Well, it's in large part, I don't disagree with their logic. I don't like the way the plan was set up because there's no exits, enough exits coming out of that subdivision going north to 55 or 56.
There aren't enough, but even this shows one that's not even there.
Yeah, and that one, as you well know, goes into a not a roundabout, it actually goes into a cul-de-sac. There's nothing there. There's only like two or three exits on that whole street, and that's
There's
the
one at
problem.
the canal and then maybe one up there.
So I think we're safe in not basically changing the speed limit. We okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. Now,
I
I'm
have
going
a
to walk
question
it.
about an actual bounce.
Please, please.
So on the transportation plan, it
Yes.
shows the calming device at the intersection,
Yes.
correct? But then the humps we're saying would need to be at the mid.
Mid-blocks.
That's what my question.
Again, the transportation plan identified where the problems were because we did not take every house along the corridor and do a speed study, right?
Okay.
Yes.
So the idea is that corridor and
So it's
where we
just
took where we did the study,
around.
that's a natural location
Okay.
to do the count, so that's where we put the dots. That's the corridors.
That's cool. So it's not going to go on that intersection like a
That's
circle.
why it's a planning study,
It's going to go, it's going to
Okay,
be
well,
further.
that's what I just
Okay.
wanted to clarify before I knew about.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're almost there. I promise you, we're almost
So
there.
these temporary speed humps,
Yes.
are they going to be the same design as the permanent one? So you're going to get the same info?
You should get, they're the same height, the same span, et cetera, they're rubber and strips that you nail
I
down,
understand
they're not
that,
concrete.
but
But yes,
it's the
the
same-
intent is they should function the same.
Okay.
And because what you're doing is you're saying, this is the obstacle that we're gonna put in the road now.
Right.
That impacts the traffic this way.
Perfect.
Okay, are we okay?
One more.
Oh, please, go ahead.
Let me just suggest that when you put it in and then you're tracking data, let's don't do anything different after than we're doing right now so that we don't skew or appear to skew the data.
Yeah, the conversation that happened, I had 2 or 3 residents come to me and simply says, if you're going to effectively do the measurement, please do not put a police officer, anything around there that will skew the data. Because that
We've
will
never
be a
collected
problem.
data with police officers.
That's right.
All of our data
But
is
they were
done.
there during the
That's why we
week.
don't even put tubes on the road, because people will
That's right.
change their opinion. And we don't stand out there with a radar gun
Yeah,
either.
we'll make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Okay, are we okay?
Okay, so I understand we have a decision. I want to make sure that we have someone collecting the data in a good statistical way. So when we come back and we say, did it work or did it not work? Are we going to have some good data collection to tell us if it worked or not?
Yeah, and I can't speak to that because it's a great point. The discussion has to be is if we're going to be consistent with the transportation community, then the experts are going to come back.
Are we going to have the expert collect the data?
That there are dozens and dozens of communities and entities and political jurisdictions throughout the state that use Dr. Perrin to collect the data. You will not get better data collection.
I'm just saying,
And
I
so,
want to make sure he
yes.
does.
The answer is yes.
Yeah, we do
We'll make
all
that
of our
happen.
data collection because ultimately I seal all the memos, all the reports, so that means I don't rely on, hey, you guys go collect data, give it to me, and I'll assume it's right. So
Okay.
we have trained counters and data collection personnel, and that's how we do it. And we follow the procedures that are standardized procedures across the United States. That's why I refer to like federal highways, because the idea is, let's all play with the same ball, let's all compare apples to apples, not go, well, and that's why we don't include things like left turners. We include them in the counts, but not in the speed information, because we know they're slowing down. And so we don't want to artificially go, oh yeah, you don't have a speeding problem. We care about what's the actual thing. So there's methodology that's in place for the standard. Again, I think of it from a reliability standpoint, if I make numbers up, there's no upside for me.
I say before the intersection.
Thank you. Hey, let me, if we can, first, thank you for coming. But before that, council,
Before and after.
comments? Council, any comments? Anything you want to add to this conversation before we break?
It's gonna take me a while to get an order again.
It's no problem, Rob.
I just want to say, I appreciate everybody coming out and voicing your opinion. This is how we collectively and collaboratively come to a decision.
Much better than just making a decision and just cutting everybody off.
That's right.
And then you did the same thing and took it out. You took it out and there was nothing.
We've had that argument, and you're right. You're right. And we made a commitment, before we ever do another one, we're going to make sure that we engage everybody into the process and make sure we flush this out. Because it's important. You need to have this voice in this process, and we appreciate you taking the time to invest that. Time before we break.
One thing, I just want to, this stuff, the people that are in charge have been elected. We need to make sure that we respect the people that are in, okay? And I apologize if I made any comments rude. But the thing is, they're here, we've got to make things work. This stuff of, whether you're driving by them, flipping them the bird, or maybe getting loud like I did, and like I said, I apologize, that's not going to cut it. And we're not going to get anywhere that way, and I understand that. I just got to make sure I just bring her down. But, we appreciate all you do.
Thanks.
At least I do. So.
Now, I just wonder, are we putting 3 or 2 in?
Hey, thank you for coming. We're going to work this, okay? Have patience. We got a plan. Thanks for the input. We're going to do this better next time, particularly when we get to 44.
Yeah. You didn't want to drag the whole minutia down by adding, but hopefully you got the information and we'll be hearing from you. Okay, do we need to contact one of our neighbors or?
Because when we put together, we're going to need to have a full voice of the council.
So you hear some of these options that we've been talking about.
Yes, yeah, and we don't want to throw out any options even.
No, but what I'm saying is, this is you can get your area together and go, these are options that we learned about tonight.
Yes, super.
What do you think would be best to maybe put here?
Okay.
So that we can come to not quite so like long tonight.
It's a little out of control. We really honestly don't have a solution.
We understand that we trust the data.
Right. But if you could say, hey, maybe this hump will work.
Sure.
You know what's going to be interesting is that, I mean, I'm the first one to admit, the Common Circle didn't work like it was. However, that was they were kind of the guinea pigs with it. And maybe they're going to be the guinea pigs again with these humps that we're putting in. So that would help us with data to maybe help, put them in other areas of the city.
Sure.
So, I mean, kind of see as you're going by, hey, what would a hump do if I was to if this was to be a hump right here, what would that look like? Or what would that feel like to me? If I was, maybe something. Just kind of picture this out.
It down before it comes to the hill. Our concern is that right before our driveway, the road angles.
I know. I don't know. Well, we even had cops saying when it gets icy there, you can slide. Yeah, everyone's like, I don't
We
know.
noticed this last year that Roy really stepped up does ice and snow removal on our street.
Yeah.
And that is super helpful.
Yeah.
It doesn't slow everybody down. It doesn't take.
I don't know, now that you've kind of learned about these and you kind of see some of these, maybe go take a picture of some
Yeah,
of
we
those
definitely will.
and then maybe kind of just visualize what would it look like if one of these were here.
Sure. Okay.
What maybe would it work, and then talk with some of your neighbors and stuff, so when it comes around, then we know.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you so much.